Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto is brought into the world of One Piece and fell in love with Nami. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Sun, the Sea, and the Stranger. The end was not an explosion. It was a tear. One moment, Naruto Uzumaki was a sun god, ablaze with the power of 6 paths, his body a nexus of every tailed beast's chakra, facing down a final, desperate echo of Kagaya's will. The air around him was not air, but pure energy, humming with a pressure that bent light. His truth-seeking orbs, spheres of absolute void, hovered behind him like a dark halo. Across the cratered wasteland of what was once a moon, the last remnant of the rabbit goddess clawed at reality itself, its form unstable, flickering between a monstrous mockery of a woman and a raw, bleeding mass of chakra. It wasn't fighting to win anymore. It was fighting to take him with it. A rift opened. Not a portal, not a clean-edged tear in space, but a violent, jagged wound in the fabric of existence. It did not have a color. It was the absence of color, a shrieking vacuum that pulled at his very soul. Sasuke was too far away, exhausted from sealing the primary body. Sakura was a distant pinprick of green light, her healing efforts spent. Kakashi was a spectator to a battle of gods. This last act was his alone. He met the pull with a surge of his own power, a golden wave of life energy pushing against the nihilistic void. For a singular, eternal second, there was a stalemate. The universe held its breath. Then, with a sound that was also a feeling, the sound of a scroll being torn, the feeling of a bone snapping, the rift shattered. It didn't close, it splintered, spiderwebbing across space-time. The main fissure latched onto the Kagaya remnant and pulled, consuming it in a silent scream. But a shard, a sliver of that nothingness, speared towards Naruto. He had no time to form a defense. The fragment of broken reality didn't hit him. It passed through him. The pain was unlike any wound. It was not the searing heat of a fire jutsu or the piercing agony of a blade. It was the pain of deconstruction. His senses unraveled first. The sight of the shattered moon dissolved into a kaleidoscope of screaming colors. The hum of his own chakra became a deafening roar of static. The feeling of the ground beneath his feet vanished, replaced by an infinite, crushing pressure. His very thoughts came apart, his memories, the taste of Ichiraka ramen, the weight of his father's cloak, the scent of Sakura's hair, the sharp sting of Sasuke's chidori, flashing before him not as a film, but as disconnected fragments of data, meaningless and cold. He felt Kurama roar inside him, a furious, terrified inferno of chakra trying to hold him together. Kit. The name was a lifeline in the storm of uncreation. Naruto latched onto it, his will, forged in loneliness and tempered in war, becoming an anchor. He fought to exist. He refused to be unmade. The pressure intensified, squeezing him through a keyhole he couldn't see. He was aware of immense speed, of worlds and stars and possibilities whipping past him as streaks of incomprehensible light. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pressure vanished. He was falling. The static in his ears was replaced by the rush of wind. The chaotic colors resolved into a piercing, singular blue. Below him was a vast, endless expanse of it, textured with frothing white lines. The sea. The smell hit him next, sharp and clean and overwhelmingly salty. It was a smell he knew, but this was different. Deeper. More ancient. His divine power, the 6-path sage mode, flickered and died, his body finally succumbing to the trauma of the transition. His black and orange jacket, already in tatters, felt heavy. His limbs were like lead. He hit the water not with a splash, but with the deadweight impact of a dropped stone. The cold was a shock that stole the air from his lungs. The pressure returned, this time the familiar weight of deep water. He sank like an anchor, the brilliant sun of this new world becoming a shimmering, diffused coin of light far above. His last conscious thought was not of a battle won or a world saved. It was a simple, aching question that echoed in the silent, crushing dark. Where am I? Then, the world went black. Nami hated the groggy ring. It was less an island and more a collection of jagged, volcanic rocks that had grudgingly consented to share the same space. Nothing grew here but wiry, salt-blasted grass and a particular type of hardy, foul-smelling moss that clung to the stone like a disease. There were no people, no animals, nothing but the cry of gulls and the eternal, thunderous crash of waves against the cliffs. It was, in a word, perfect. Perfectly isolated. Perfectly miserable. A place no one, not even Arlong's most bored and sadistic underlings, would ever bother to visit. It allowed her the solitude to work. Her small, stolen boat was anchored in a sheltered cove, hidden from the open sea. On the highest, flattest rock she could find, a worn leather satchel lay open. Beside it, a large sheet of high-quality parchment was weighted down at the corners with smooth, dark stones. Her hand, stained with ink and decorated with fine calluses from years of holding a G-pen, moved with a fluid, practiced grace. Lines formed, coasts took shape, currents were marked with delicate, swirling arrows. She was charting the aberrant tides of the Konomi Islands. A useless, academic exercise to anyone else. To her, it was a lifeline. Each line drawn was a coin saved. Each chart completed was a step closer to 100 million berries. A step closer to buying back her village. To buying back her life. The work required absolute concentration. She had to account for the pull of the seasons, the strange magnetic fields of the east blue, the subtle shifts in wind patterns. She blocked out the sound of the waves, the chill of the sea spray on her skin, the gnawing hunger in her stomach. She focused on the ink, the parchment, the numbers. The numbers were all that mattered. A flicker of color on the periphery of her vision broke the spell. She froze, her pen hovering a millimeter above the paper. It was down on the small, sandy beach of the cove. Something orange. Not the orange of a safety buoy or a piece of flotsam. A deeper, richer orange, like a sunset. It was tangled with black. And it was moving, nudged back and forth by the gentle lapping of the tide. Her first instinct was a cold spike of fear. Who? Had she been followed? Was it a marine? A pirate? A bounty hunter who'd mistaken her for a real criminal? Her hand instinctively went to the inside of her vest, where 3 perfectly balanced sections of a wooden bow staff were tucked away. It wasn't much of a weapon, but against a single opponent, her speed and agility had served her well enough to survive. She crept to the edge of the high rock, lying flat on her stomach to present the smallest possible silhouette. Peering over, she got a clear view of the cove. The thing on the beach was a person. A man, lying face down in the wet sand, waves washing over his ankles. He was dressed in the strangest clothes she had ever seen, tattered black pants and a jacket of that vibrant orange, equally shredded. His hair was a startling shock of blonde, spiky and matted with sand and water. He was powerfully built, broad shoulders and a lean waist, even in his prone state. A castaway? Possible. But his arrival was too convenient. She scanned the horizon. No sign of a shipwreck, no floating debris, no other boats. It was as if he'd simply fallen from the sky. The thought was absurd, but in a world of men made of rubber and swordsmen who could cut steel, she had learned to widen her definition of possibility. He could be a threat. He could be bait. He could be a problem she absolutely did not have time for. Her mission was everything. Her village was everything. A single misstep, a single act of charity, could unravel 8 years of deception and sacrifice. The smart move was to pack her things, get in her boat, and sail away. Leave him to the tide. It was the safe, logical, ruthless choice. It was the choice Arlong had taught her to make. She watched him for a full 10 minutes, her mind a whirlwind of risk assessment. He didn't move. Was he even alive? If he died here, his body might be discovered. Questions would be asked. It could lead people here, and from here, it was a short trip to Kokoyashi. Another risk. Dead or alive, the man was a complication. With a curse that was barely a whisper, she slid back from the edge. The logical choice be damned. Leaving a man to die, even a stranger who was probably trouble, still felt like a line she wasn't quite willing to cross. It was a weakness, a sentimental scrap left over from a childhood that felt like another lifetime. A piece of Belmere she hadn't managed to bury. She disassembled her staff, connecting the three pieces with a series of quick, practiced twists. Holding it in a two-handed grip, she made her way down the winding, treacherous path to the beach. Her movements were silent, her footfalls making no sound on the rock. She approached the body from the side, staying out of a potential immediate line of sight if he was faking. The tide washed over his boots again. He groaned. Nami froze, her knuckles white on the staff. The sound wasn't one of aggression. It was a low, pained noise of pure misery. He was alive. Taking a steadying breath, she nudged his shoulder with the end of her staff. Hey. No response. She poked him again, harder this time. Hey. Get up. The man shifted, rolling onto his side with a waterlogged cough. Sand and seawater spilled from his mouth. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, his head hanging low. His blonde hair dripped, casting a curtain over his face. He seemed lost. Not just physically, but fundamentally. Who are you? Nami demanded, her voice sharp, betraying none of the reluctant pity she felt. She kept the staff leveled at his chest. How did you get here? He slowly lifted his head, and for the first time, she saw his face. It was young, probably not much older than her, but it was the face of someone who had seen far too much. And his eyes, they were the most intensely blue eyes she had ever seen, the color of the deep sea on a clear day. But it wasn't the color that held her. It was the look in them. A profound, bone-deep weariness, mingled with a startling clarity. And something else. A flicker of power that made the hair on her arms stand up. He didn't look at her weapon. He looked at her. Really looked. His gaze was so direct, so perceptive, it felt like he was seeing past the hardened thief and the cynical survivor, right down to the terrified girl locked inside. It was unnerving. I could ask you the same thing, he said, his voice raspy from the saltwater. It was a low, calm tenor, with an accent she'd never heard before. I'm the one with the weapon, she shot back, forcing bravado into her tone. That means I ask the questions. Where did your ship go down? He blinked, a flicker of confusion in those blue eyes. He glanced around, at the empty sea, the towering rocks, then back at her. Ship. Right. No ship. No ship? So you just swam here from where? The Grand Line. Her tone was laced with sarcasm. He didn't rise to the bait. He just continued to look at her, his head tilted slightly. This is an island. It's a rock posing as an island, she corrected curtly. And you're trespassing. Now talk. Are you a pirate? Marine? A strange, sad smile touched his lips for a fraction of a second. Neither. I was a soldier. I think. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his movements stiff. He winced, a hand going to his ribs. The war, is it over? War. What war? The occasional clashes between pirate crews or the Marines stamping out a rebellion hardly constituted a war. He was either delirious or from somewhere very, very far away. There's no war here, she said, her suspicion mounting. Just the sea and the people trying to survive it. He seemed to absorb that, his gaze turning inward. He ran a hand through his wet hair, pushing it back from his face. That was when she saw the other strange thing about him. Whiskers. 3 thin, dark lines etched onto each of his cheeks, like scars or tattoos. They gave his face a feral, untamed quality. "I see," he said softly. He looked down at his own hands, flexing his fingers as if making sure they still worked. "The energy, it's all wrong." "Energy?" Nami lowered her staff a few inches, intrigued despite herself. "What are you talking about?" "It doesn't matter." He looked up at her again, that unnerving perception back in his eyes. He noticed the parchment and G-pen she was still clutching in her other hand. "You're a navigator." It wasn't a question. He'd stated it as a fact. "What if I am?" "You're good at it," he continued, his gaze flicking to the half-finished chart on the rock above. "The lines are precise. Confident." He paused, and his eyes met hers again. This time, they were filled with a startling gentleness. "But you're not just charting tides, are you? You're looking for a way out." Nami's blood ran cold. Her grip on her staff tightened until her knuckles ached. No one had ever looked at her and seen that. They saw a greedy thief, a manipulative witch, a traitor to her own kind. No one saw the desperation that fueled it all. This stranger, this castaway who had been on her island for less than 5 minutes, saw it. It terrified her. "You don't know anything about me," she snapped, her voice harsher than she intended. She took a step back, re-establishing the distance. "My business is my own. The nearest inhabited island is that way." She pointed with her staff to the southeast. "It's called Kokoyasi. Though I wouldn't recommend it. The locals aren't very friendly to outsiders. Especially not ones who can't pay the toll." She was hoping the mention of money would scare him off. Most drifters were broke. He just nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. He was sensing it. She could feel him sensing it, the lie, the pain behind the lie, the raw, festering wound of her village's subjugation. "I don't have any money," he said plainly. "But I can work. I'm strong." It was an understatement. Now that he was sitting up, she could see the definition of muscle beneath his torn jacket. He was built for combat, lean and powerful like a panther. He could probably snap her staff in two with his bare hands. "We don't need any farmhands," she said, turning away. This was getting too complicated. Her heart was pounding with a strange mix of fear and an even stranger, more dangerous feeling, hope. She stamped it down viciously. Hope was a poison. "Just get off my island. I've got work to do." She started walking back up the path, her back rigid. She expected him to call after her, to beg, to threaten. She heard nothing but the waves. When she risked a glance back, he was still sitting there, not looking at her, but staring out at the sea with an expression of such profound and absolute loneliness that it made her chest ache. He looked like the last man in the entire world. She cursed again, this time with real heat. She stomped back to her satchel, shoving her pen and the rolled-up chart inside. Her hands were shaking. What was wrong with her? This was a distraction. A dangerous one. "Fine," she bit out, not looking at him. "You can stay until you get your bearings. But you stay out of my way. And the first sign of trouble, I'll leave you for the Sea Kings. Got it?" She heard a soft sound behind her. He was on his feet now. "Got it," he said. "My name is Naruto." "I didn't ask," she retorted, slinging her satchel over her shoulder. She hesitated. It was rude, but it was ruder to let a potential ally, or enemy, remain anonymous. "Nami." "Nami," he repeated, the name tasting strange on his tongue. He gave her a small, genuine smile. For the first time, the weariness in his eyes receded, replaced by a glint of warmth. "It's a good name." Nami just grunted in response, her face heating up. She turned and marched back up the rock, determined to ignore the disquieting flutter in her stomach. The stranger named Naruto was a problem. A big, blonde, whiskered problem. And she had a terrible feeling he was about to make her life infinitely more complicated. Naruto spent the next few hours in a state of quiet observation. While the girl, Nami, returned to her perch on the high rocks, pointedly ignoring him, he took stock of his situation. His body ached. Not just from the dimensional transit, but from the dregs of a war that had spanned days. Kurama was quiet within him, a deep, rumbling presence that was more exhaustion than anger. The fox was conserving his energy, trying to make sense of their new reality just as he was. The world itself was the most disorienting part. He sat in a meditative posture on the sand, extending his senses. In his home world, he could feel the chakra of every living thing, a vast, interconnected network of life energy. He could feel the trees, the earth, the very air. Here, there was nothing. Or rather, there was something, but it was chaotic, wild, and utterly alien. He could feel the vibrant, powerful life force of the ocean, a sleeping giant of immense power. He could feel the stubborn life in the wiry grass. He could feel the girl on the cliff, a bright, flickering flame of defiance and sorrow. But it wasn't chakra. It was something else, something untamed. He was a master sensor floating in a sea of static. He was blind. His supplies were gone. His pouch of kunai and scrolls had been torn away. All he had were the tattered clothes on his back and the power thrumming beneath his skin. Power that, he suspected, worked on principles this world might not understand. His focus returned to Nami. He didn't need to be a chakra sensor to read her. Her pain was a fortress she had built around herself, brick by painful brick. He had seen that same look in the eyes of countless people during the war, the look of someone who had sacrificed parts of their own soul to protect something precious. Her lie about Kokoyashi being unfriendly was as thin as glass. She wasn't warning him away for his sake, she was protecting the island from him. From any outsider. Why? He needed information. And sitting here waiting for her to trust him would take too long. He rose to his feet, finding a secluded spot behind a large boulder, out of her line of sight. He brought his index and middle fingers together, a gesture so ingrained it was like breathing. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a soft poof of smoke, a perfect duplicate of himself appeared. The clone blinked, looked at the original, and nodded. No words were needed. They shared the same thoughts, the same goals. The island she pointed to, Naruto said, his voice low. Kokoyashi. Go there. Be discreet. I want to know what she's so afraid of. Don't engage unless you have to. Just observe. The clone nodded again. Got it. He crouched, gathering the strange, wild energy of this world into his legs. It felt different, like trying to breathe water, but the principle was the same. He leaped, his body a blur of orange, clearing 50 feet of water and landing silently on a neighboring rock. From there, he was a phantom, bounding from stone to stone with preternatural speed, heading southeast. Nami, absorbed in her work, noticed nothing. The original Naruto sat back down, closing his eyes. The unique gift of the shadow clones was shared experience. He wouldn't just get a report, he would live what the clone lived, see what it saw, the moment it dispelled. Now, all he had to do was wait. And as he waited, he let his mind drift. He thought of his world. Of the faces of his friends. A sharp, piercing grief, one he had kept at bay with the immediate need for survival, lanced through him. He was truly alone. A stranger in a strange land, a king with no kingdom, a hero with no home to return to. The vastness of the sea suddenly felt less like freedom and more like a cage. He pushed the feeling down. Despair was a luxury he couldn't afford. He had survived worse. He would survive this. He had to. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple that reminded him so fiercely of his own jacket it made his chest tighten. Nami finally packed up her things for good, her movements weary. She glanced down at him, her expression a mixture of annoyance and uncertainty, before descending the path. "You're still here," she stated, stopping a safe 10 feet away. "You said I could be," he replied, opening his eyes. "I figured you'd have the sense to build a raft or something by now," she muttered. She held out a small, hard piece of dried meat. It looked about as appetizing as a leather shoe. "Here." He took it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You'll be useless if you starve to death," she said, trying to sound callous, but he heard the underlying note of reluctant decency. He was about to take a bite when it happened. A jolt, sharp and sudden, went through his mind. It was the influx of memory, the return of the clone's experience. His eyes unfocused for a second as a flood of information washed over him. The clone's perspective, the silent, swift journey across the water. The first sight of Kokoyashi, a beautiful island with groves of orange trees. The feeling of wrongness. The town was too quiet. The people moved with a furtive, hunted look. Their smiles were brittle, their eyes filled with fear. Then, the sight of them. Fishmen. Towering, monstrous beings with fins and sharp teeth, swaggering through the town square like kings. They kicked over a merchant's cart, laughing as the oranges spilled into the dirt. An old woman cried out, and one of the fishmen, a grotesque creature with lips like a carp, backhanded her into a wall. Naruto's jaw tightened. The taste of the dried meat turned to ash in his mouth. The clone's memory continued. He saw the villagers handing over their money, every last berry, to the smirking fish creatures. He heard the name, spoken in terrified whispers. Arlong. He saw the terror spike when they mentioned Nami, referring to her as Arlong's property, his witch of a cartographer. And finally, he saw the tower looming over the island from a distance. A fortress, gaudy and threatening, with a twisted symbol on its flag, a shark, bisected by a jagged line. Arlong Park. The memories settled. The clone had seen enough and dispelled itself in a hidden alleyway, the mission complete. Naruto's eyes refocused on Nami. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The money. The charts. Her fear of outsiders. The fake smile plastered over a well of despair. She wasn't working for herself. She was a slave, buying back the lives of her people one painstakingly drawn map at a time. The 100 million berries, it was a ransom. A cold, quiet rage, the kind he hadn't felt since pain destroyed his village, began to build in his chest. It was a still, deep anger, more potent than any explosive outburst. It was the fury of a protector who had just found someone to protect. Nami saw the shift in his expression. The calm, lonely castaway was gone. In his place was someone else, someone terrifyingly focused. The air around him seemed to grow heavy. "What?" she asked, her voice wary. "What is it?" Before he could answer, voices echoed from the direction of the open sea. Boisterous, cruel voices. "Nyahaha. I told you I smelled her. The witch is hiding out on this worthless rock pile." 3 figures rounded the cliffside, stomping onto the beach. They were fishmen. One was the carp-lipped creature from the clone's memory. The other 2 were similarly brutish, armed with crude clubs. They saw Nami and their faces broke into predatory grins. "There you are, Nami," the leader sneered. Lord Arlong was getting worried. Or, annoyed. "Time to come back and draw your pretty little pictures." Nami went rigid. All the color drained from her face. She instinctively moved to hide Naruto behind her, a gesture so futile it was heartbreaking. "Chew," she said, her voice trembling but trying for defiance. "I'm not finished. I need more time." "Time's up," Chew said, his eyes landing on Naruto. He looked him up and down, a look of contemptuous dismissal on his face. And what's this? Found a stray human. You know the rules, Nami. No friends. No attachments. He spat on the sand. We'll deal with him. Make it quick. The other two fishmen cracked their knuckles, advancing on Naruto. They were bigger than him, their muscles coiled with the dense power of their race. To them, he was just another weak, soft-skinned human. Stay back, Nami whispered desperately to Naruto, her body shaking. Don't fight them. You can't win. Naruto didn't look at her. He looked at Chu, his blue eyes as cold and hard as glaciers. He took a step forward, moving in front of Nami. It's okay, Nami, he said, his voice dangerously calm. This won't take long. Chu laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Listen to him. The little human thinks he's a hero. He puckered his massive lips. Let me show you what we do with heroes. Water gun. He spat a glob of water with the force and speed of a cannonball. It shrieked through the air, aimed squarely at Naruto's head. Nami cried out, a strangled sound of terror. The world seemed to slow down. Naruto didn't dodge. He didn't flinch. He simply raised his hand, palm open. The water cannonball, a projectile that could punch through the hull of a ship, slammed into his palm. And stopped. It didn't splash. It didn't explode. It simply stopped, hovering in a perfect, compressed sphere of water in his hand, held there by a force that defied physics. The air crackled. The three fishmen stared, their sneers frozen on their faces. Nami's breath hitched in her throat, her eyes wide with disbelief. Naruto looked at the sphere of water in his hand, then back at Chu. His expression was unreadable. Is that it? He asked, his voice quiet. He closed his hand. The water dissipated into a fine mist. What? Chu stammered, his bravado evaporating. What devil fruit is that? The other two fishmen, momentarily stunned, let out bestial roars and charged, brandishing their clubs. What happened next was not a fight. A fight implies a contest. This was a removal. The first fishman swung his club, a heavy, iron-studded log that could pulverize bone. Naruto moved, not with a burst of speed, but with a fluid, effortless shift of his body. He wasn't there anymore. He was beside the fishman, his hand a blur. He tapped the creature's elbow. A sharp crack echoed on the beach. The fishman screamed, his arm hanging at an unnatural angle, the club clattering onto the sand. Before the scream finished, Naruto's other hand chopped at the back of his neck. The fishman's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed in a heap. The second one hesitated for a fatal half-second. Naruto closed the distance between them in the space of a heartbeat. He didn't even seem to be moving fast, he was just there. His palm struck the fishman's solar plexus. It wasn't a hard strike. It looked almost gentle. But the fishman folded like a piece of paper, all the air leaving his body in a silent, agonized gasp. He crumpled to the ground, twitching. 2 down. It had taken less than 3 seconds. Chu stood frozen, his carp lips trembling. The human hadn't used a weapon. He hadn't used any flashy, named attack. He had just moved. And his men, his strong, proud fishman brethren, had fallen like scarecrows. Monster. Chu whispered, taking a stumbling step back. Naruto turned to face him. He began to walk forward, his footsteps silent on the sand. Each step was calm, measured, and filled with an inexorable purpose. The setting sun cast his shadow long and dark across the beach, engulfing the terrified fishman. You hurt them, Naruto said, his voice still quiet, but now it held the chilling promise of thunder. You made them afraid. You took their homes, their money, their hope. He was in front of Chu now, looking up slightly at the taller creature, yet somehow he was the one who towered. You put a cage around her heart, he continued, his gaze flicking for a second towards Nami, who was watching, mesmerized and terrified, her hand over her mouth. For that, there is no forgiveness. Chu shrieked, a sound of pure panic, and threw a desperate punch. It was clumsy, all power and no technique. Naruto caught the massive, webbed fist in his hand. He squeezed. There was a sickening crunch of breaking bones. Chu howled in agony, falling to his knees. Naruto leaned in close, his voice a lethal whisper. Go back to your master. Tell Arlong that his reign is over. Tell him I'm coming. He released the shattered hand. Chu scrambled backward, cradling his ruined fist, tears of pain and terror streaming down his face. He stumbled to his feet and fled, splashing frantically into the water and swimming away with a speed born of absolute mortal fear. The beach fell silent. All that remained was the sound of the waves and the groans of the two unconscious fishmen. Naruto stood there for a moment, the cold rage slowly receding, replaced by a deep, resonant resolve. He turned to face Nami. She was staring at him, her eyes wide pools of shock, fear, and something else, a fragile, shimmering sliver of awe. She saw the unconscious bodies. She saw the impossible power. But more than that, she saw the reason for it. He hadn't done it for sport or for pride. He had done it for her. He walked towards her, his expression softening. The terrifying warrior was gone, and the gentle, perceptive stranger was back, though now imbued with a terrifying new context. He stopped in front of her, his gaze dropping to her left shoulder, to the spot on her arm where the fabric of her shirt was thin. He could see the dark lines of it, even in the dimming light. The symbol of her servitude. The mark of the shark. Arlong's brand. He understood everything now. The weight she carried was heavier than any mountain. His hand came up, not fast, but slow, giving her every chance to pull away. He didn't touch the mark itself. He gently rested his fingertips on the barest part of her shoulder, just above it. His touch was warm, solid, and incredibly gentle. It sent a shiver through her entire body. He looked her directly in the eye, his own blue eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. There was no pity in them. Only understanding, empathy, and an unbreakable, absolute certainty. I'm going to set you free. It was not a boast. It was not an offer. It was a promise. Chapter 2, The Fall of the Fishman. The silence that fell upon the beach was heavier than any sound. It was a vacuum, left behind by the sudden, violent expulsion of Chu's panicked retreat. The two unconscious fishmen lay like beached whales, their groans the only punctuation to the rhythmic sigh of the waves. Nami stood frozen, her mind a maelstrom of conflicting data. 8 years of ingrained terror screamed that this was impossible. 8 years of conditioning insisted that any act of defiance against Arlong and his crew would be met with apocalyptic retribution. The fishmen were a superior race. They were stronger, faster, unstoppable. That was the foundational truth of her world, the bedrock of her slavery. And this man, this stranger named Naruto, had shattered that truth in less than a minute. He hadn't fought them. He had dismissed them. The difference was staggering. It was the difference between a brawler winning a street fight and a master calligrapher flicking away a stray drop of ink. The sheer, casual, unassailable competence of it was more terrifying than any display of brute force. What have you done?" she finally whispered, the words catching in her throat. It wasn't an accusation. It was a plea for understanding, an attempt to make sense of the reality that had just been rewritten before her eyes. Naruto turned from watching the ripples where Chu had vanished. The chilling, hard-edged fury was gone from his face, replaced by that unnerving calm. He looked at her, then at the unconscious fishmen, his expression practical, as if he were looking at a mess that needed cleaning up. "I started a conversation," he said simply. "A conversation?" "You crippled them," she shot back, hysterical edge to her voice. "Chu is going back to Arlong Park right now. He's going to tell Arlong what happened. Do you have any idea what he'll do? He'll come here himself. He'll slaughter everyone in Kokoyashi just to make a point. Good, Naruto interrupted. His voice was soft, but it cut through her panic like a kunai. Let him come. It's better if he knows I'm waiting. Nami stared at him, dumbfounded. The sheer audacity of the statement was breathtaking. Waiting for Arlong? People didn't wait for Arlong. They fled from him. They hid from him. They prayed to whatever indifferent gods might be listening that he would pass them by. You're insane, she breathed. You saw 2 of his officers. He's a monster. He's 10 times stronger than them. He'll tear you apart. No, he won't, Naruto said. There was no arrogance in his tone, just a quiet statement of fact. He walked over to the first unconscious fishman, grabbing the creature's own belt and efficiently hog-tying his hands and feet with practiced knots. You've lived under his shadow for so long, you think his shadow is the sun. It's not. It's just a bully's bluff. He moved to the second one, repeating the process. His movements were economical, precise. The movements of a soldier who had done this 1,000 times before. Nami watched, her mind struggling to keep up. This wasn't the behavior of a reckless fool. It was the behavior of someone who had already calculated every outcome and was now simply executing the plan. What are you? She asked, the question raw with genuine curiosity and fear. That thing Chu did, the water bullet, it should have killed you. And you just caught it. Are you a devil fruit user? Naruto paused his work, glancing back at her. Devil fruit? The term was unfamiliar, but he grasped the context. A source of power. No. What I have is my own. He finished the knot on the second fishman and stood up, dusting the sand from his hands. It's called chakra. It's the energy that connects all living things. Or, it was, where I'm from. He looked out at the alien sea. Here, it feels different. But the principle is the same. Energy is energy. And fear, he added, his blue eyes locking onto hers, is just a weapon used by those who don't have enough real strength. He walked back towards her, stopping a few feet away. The setting sun haloed his blonde hair, making him seem like a figure from a myth. You have a choice to make, Nami, he said, his voice gentle again. You can keep believing he's a monster you can't defeat, and you can get in your boat and sail as far away as you can. I won't stop you. Or, he continued, a new intensity entering his tone, you can help me finish what I just started. You can help me take back your home. The choice hung in the air between them, heavy and shimmering with terrifying possibility. Sail away. It was the smart option. The safe option. She had a boat. She had her maps. She could disappear into the Grand Line, start a new life. No one would ever find her. She would be free. But Kokoyashi wouldn't be. Genzo, Nojiko, the whole village, they would pay the price for her escape, and for this stranger's defiance. Arlong would make an example of them all. The thought was a physical pain, a vice grip on her heart. She couldn't do it. After 8 years of living a lie for them, she couldn't abandon them at the final, fatal hurdle. And then there was him. Naruto. He stood there, offering her a choice she never thought she'd have. Not a demand, not a threat, but a genuine partnership. He wasn't just offering to fight for her. He was asking for her help. The idea was so foreign, so powerful, it made her dizzy. Her hand, of its own accord, tightened around the bow staff she still held. It was a flimsy piece of wood against a monster like Arlong. But it was hers. If we fight him, she said, her voice barely a whisper, we can't just run in. Arlong Park is a fortress. He has dozens of fishmen in there, all of them stronger than a normal human. They have an armory, watchtowers, we'd be cut down before we got past the gate. A slow smile spread across Naruto's face. It was the first genuine, truly warm smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his entire demeanor. The weary soldier vanished, replaced by a beacon of confidence and charisma. The hope she had been trying to crush ignited into a bonfire. "Good," he said. "That means you've chosen. Now, show me. Show me this fortress." The small, hidden cove became their war room. Nami's boat, the Venture, bobbed gently on the tide as they sat on its small deck. The last vestiges of sunlight bled from the sky, and a brilliant, unfamiliar moon cast a silver sheen on the water. Nami unrolled a fresh sheet of parchment, anchoring it to the worn wooden planks. This was her domain. With a G-pen in her hand, she was not a victim or a thief. She was an artist, a scientist. "This is Arlong Park," she began, her hand moving with a speed and confidence that belied her trembling nerves. Lines appeared on the page, forming the unmistakable, ugly shape of the fortress. "It's built on a spit of land on the eastern side of the island. The main building is 5 stories tall. Arlong's throne room is at the very top." As she drew, she spoke, the words tumbling out of her. A flood of tactical information she had been forced to memorize over 8 long years. "The main gate is always guarded by at least 4 fishmen. There are watchtowers here," she drew 2 squares, "and here. They're manned 24/7. The first floor is a bar and barracks. That's where most of the crew sleeps. The second is the armory. The third and fourth floors are where they process their loot and run their operations." Her pen hesitated. "The 5th floor, that's the cartography room. That's where I work." The pen tip pressed down, leaving a small, dark blot of ink on the parchment, a tiny stain of remembered pain. Naruto didn't comment on her hesitation. He simply watched her hand, watched the map take shape, his focus absolute. "What about his officers? The ones besides Chu?" "Kurubi," Nami said, her voice tight. "He's a Ray Fishman, master of Fishman karate. He's fast, vicious, and he fights with a cold efficiency. He's usually patrolling the grounds or training the others." She drew a small K near the central courtyard. "Then there's Hat-chan. He's an octopus fishman. He's not very bright. But he has 6 arms and uses 6 swords at once. His swordsmanship is a joke to a real swordsman, but for anyone else, it's a storm of steel. He's usually goofing off near the pool area." She marked it with an H. She filled in the details: patrol routes, guard rotations, the underwater entrance Arlong sometimes used. It was the most detailed, intimate portrait of her prison ever created. When she was done, she sat back, looking at the finished map. It was a perfect representation of their impossible task. "Even if we get past the gate guards and the towers," she said, her voice heavy with doubt, "the moment the alarm is raised, we'll be swarmed. There are at least 40 of them in there. 40 against 2. Naruto looked at the map, then at her. 40 against 1,002, he corrected gently. Nami blinked. "What?" He held up his hand, bringing his index and middle fingers together in that strange, 2-fingered sign. "Shadow clone jutsu." He didn't shout it. He barely whispered it. But the effect was instantaneous. The air around the boat seemed to thicken. In a series of soft, rolling poofs that sounded like dozens of pillows being dropped at once, the small cove was suddenly filled with people. Or rather, with him. Dozens upon dozens of Narutos stood on the rocks, on the beach, even on the surface of the water, their feet planted on the gentle swell as if it were solid ground. All of them were identical, from the tattered orange jacket to the determined look in their blue eyes. Nami's jaw dropped. She stared, speechless, at the silent army that had materialized from thin air. It wasn't an illusion. They were solid. They cast shadows in the moonlight. She could feel the displaced air, smell the faint scent of ozone. "How?" she stammered, pointing a shaking finger. Is this your devil fruit? No devil fruit, the Naruto beside her said, his voice calm amidst the surreal scene. Each one is a solid clone. They can think, they can fight, they can follow complex orders. They're not as durable as me, a solid hit will make them disappear, but what they learn, I learn instantly. He smiled at her stunned expression. So, the odds aren't 40-2. They're closer to 1-25, in our favor. The sheer strategic implication of it crashed down on Nami like a tidal wave. An army. He could create an army at will. This changed everything. This wasn't a suicide mission anymore. This was, a war. A war they could actually win. The clones stood silently, awaiting orders. The original Naruto turned his attention back to the map. His finger traced a line from the sea to Kokoyashi village. First, the civilians, he said, his tone shifting into that of a field commander. Arlong will be enraged. His first move will be to make an example of your village to break your spirit. He looked up at the sea of his own faces. 500 of you, he commanded, his voice clear and carrying. Over the water. Your mission is to infiltrate Kokoyashi. Do not engage any fishmen you see. Your priority is the villagers. Be silent. Be invisible. Form a protective perimeter around the town. Reassure the people, keep them inside, keep them safe. No one gets hurt. Understood? A chorus of understood echoed from the clones, a sound that was both bizarre and profoundly reassuring. In a blur of orange, half the army vanished, leaping across the water with silent, impossible speed, a river of phantoms flowing towards the slumbering island. Nami watched them go, her heart pounding. The care. The first thing he thought of was not the attack, not the glory, but protecting the innocent. It was a concept so alien to her world of pirates and corrupt marines that it almost didn't compute. Naruto's finger moved on the map, tapping the fortress itself. The rest of you will be the assault force. We'll divide into 3 teams. Team Alpha, he pointed to a group of clones on the beach, you're on demolition. Your targets are the watchtowers. Take them out simultaneously and silently. Once that's done, you'll target the armory. Destroy their weapons. He pointed to another group. Team Beta. You're the vanguard. You'll create a diversion at the main gate. Be loud. Be chaotic. Draw the bulk of their forces to the front. Don't worry about getting hit. Just cause as much confusion as you can. He looked at the remaining 100 or so clones. Team Gamma. You're with me. We're going in clean. While the rest of them are distracted, we're going to dismantle their command structure from the inside out. We'll take down Kurubi, Hachan, and any other officer we find. We'll sweep the building floor by floor. Our goal is to isolate Arlong. He looked up from the map, his eyes finding Nami's in the dark. And you, he said, will be our guide. You know the layout better than any of us. You'll stay with me. You'll call out the targets. Me. She was part of the plan. Not a bystander, not a prize to be won, but an active participant. She clutched her staff, her knuckles white. I can fight, she said, the words feeling small but necessary. Naruto's expression softened. I know you can, he said. But your greatest weapon right now is your mind. Your knowledge is what will let us win this without a single villager getting hurt. That's more important than any punch you could throw. Can you do it? She took a deep breath, the salty air filling her lungs. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But for the first time in 8 years, it was joined by something else, something fierce and bright. Resolve. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong. I can. The assault on Arlong Park began not with a bang, but with a whisper. From the edge of the woods bordering Kokoyashi, Genzo, the self-appointed sheriff and town protector, watched the fortress with weary eyes. He held an old rifle in his hands, more a symbol of defiance than a practical weapon. He'd seen Chu swim back to the park in a panic an hour ago. He knew what that meant. Retribution was coming. He and a few other brave, foolish men had gathered to form a pathetic line of defense, a gesture they all knew was futile but necessary for their pride. Then they saw it. A flicker of orange in the trees. Then another. And another. Silent figures dropped from the branches, landing without a sound. Genzo raised his rifle, his heart leaping into his throat. More enemies. One of the figures, a perfect duplicate of the blonde man from the stories that were already spreading like wildfire, raised a hand, palm open in a universal sign of peace. "We are not your enemy," the clone said, its voice a perfect echo of the originals. "We are here to help. Naruto sent us. Our only mission is to ensure your safety. Please, gather everyone and stay in your homes. Do not come out until it's over." Genzo stared, his mind reeling. Behind the first clone, dozens more appeared, forming a silent, disciplined line between the village and the path to Arlong Park. They weren't looking at him. They were looking at the fortress, their expressions serene and focused. One of them appeared beside Nojiko, who had rushed out with a kitchen knife, and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "He'll be all right," the clone said to her, somehow knowing her deepest fear was for Nami. "Naruto is with her. He won't let anything happen to her." Hope, so long a stranger in this village, began to dawn on the faces of the terrified townspeople as they were gently guided back to their homes by the silent, orange-clad guardians. At the same moment, on the outer walls of Arlong Park, two fishmen in a watchtower were complaining about the late hour. One of them yawned, turning to his partner. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Sounded like a poof." Before he could elaborate, two hands shot out of the shadows behind them, chopping them both on the neck with precise, silent force. They crumpled without a sound. Two Naruto clones dusted their hands off and gave a thumbs up to another pair of clones across the compound, who had just done the exact same thing to the other watchtower. Team Alpha's first objective was complete. Then came the noise. Boom! A massive, swirling blue sphere of energy, a Rasengan, slammed into the main gate of Arlong Park, vaporizing the heavy, iron-reinforced wood and sending a shockwave that rattled the entire fortress. Dozens of Naruto clones, Team Beta, stood where the gate had been, one of them pulling his hand back from the attack. "Hey, fish sticks," one of them yelled, cupping his hands around his mouth. "We're here to foreclose on your oppression. The heroes have arrived." The effect was immediate. Alarms blared. Fishmen poured out of the barracks, roaring in anger, their eyes landing on the sea of orange jackets. The diversion had begun. A chaotic, swirling melee erupted in the main courtyard as Team Beta engaged the full might of Arlong's crew, a whirlwind of punches, kicks, and disappearing clones that sowed maximum confusion. And in the chaos, on the far side of the compound, Naruto and Nami slipped out of the water, followed by the silent 100 clones of Team Gamma. They were completely unnoticed. "The armory is on the second floor, East Wing," Nami whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sounds of battle from the front were terrifying, but the disciplined silence of the clones around her was awe-inspiring. "Team Alpha, you have your target," Naruto commanded softly. A group of clones broke off, melting into the shadows of the building. A few moments later, a secondary explosion, muffled by the walls, rocked the fortress from within. The armory was gone. "Kurubi is next," Nami said, pointing towards the central building. "He's probably on his way to the main courtyard now." "We'll intercept him," Naruto said. He looked at Nami, his eyes serious. "Stay close. Don't leave my side." She nodded, her hand gripping her staff so tightly her knuckles were white. They moved into the building, a silent wave of purpose. They found Kurubi in a wide hallway, his face a mask of cold fury as he headed for the main fight. He skidded to a halt as 100 identical blonde men and one orange-haired girl blocked his path. What is this sorcery? Kurobi snarled, dropping into a low fishman karate stance. No matter. I'll crush you all. Just me is fine, Naruto said, stepping forward as his clones fanned out, securing the perimeter. Nami. His style. Fast, she said, her voice tight but clear. He uses water from the air, manipulates it. His strikes are like spears. Kurobi lunged, his movements a blur. 100 brick fist, he roared, his fist cutting through the air. To Nami's eyes, he was impossibly fast. To Naruto, he was moving in slow motion. Naruto didn't even seem to try. He swayed to the left, Kurobi's fist missing him by a millimeter. He tilted his head back, another strike whistling past his nose. He took one step back, avoiding a powerful leg sweep. He wasn't just dodging, he was flowing, moving around the fishman karate master like water around a stone, his expression utterly placid. You're not even trying. Kurobi roared, his frustration mounting. He unleashed a furious combination of punches and kicks, each one powerful enough to shatter stone. Naruto dodged them all without breaking a sweat. Naruto replied calmly, his feet a blur as he sidestepped a final, desperate lunge. I'm learning. In that one moment of overextension, Naruto's hand shot out. It wasn't a punch. He simply tapped Kurobi's chest with 2 fingers. It was as if he'd been struck by lightning. Kurobi's eyes went wide. His body seized up, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious before he hit the floor. Naruto had used a precise, minute burst of chakra to disrupt his nervous system. It was a technique used for medical purposes, but when applied with his control, it was a perfect, non-lethal takedown. Nami stared, her jaw agape. The dreaded master of fishman karate, defeated with a tap. Hat-chan, Naruto said, already turning. The pool? Why yes, Nami stammered, shaking herself back to the present. They moved through the fortress, a silent orange tide. They found Hat-chan by the large decorative pool, flailing with his 6 swords at a handful of Naruto's diversionary clones who had led him on a chase. Take this, you stupid humans. 6-sword style, octopus pot stance. Hat-chan yelled, spinning his swords into a defensive wall. Naruto walked forward, not even looking at the swords. One of his black truth-seeking orbs detached from his back, floating lazily in front of him. It expanded in a fraction of a second into a perfect, dark shield. Hatchan's 6 sword struck the shield. Clang. 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 The sound was dull, final. The swords, forged of steel, didn't even scratch the surface of the orb. They simply stopped dead. Hat-chan stared in disbelief. Naruto walked past the shield, his hand moving in a blur. He didn't disarm him. He just plucked all 6 swords from Hatchan's grasp, one by one, before the octopus fishman could even register what was happening. He tossed them into the pool. You're a terrible swordsman, Naruto said, not unkindly. He then bonked a bewildered Hat-chan on the head with his fist. The octopus's eyes swirled, and he toppled backward into the pool with a great splash. The fortress was falling. The main force was occupied. The officers were neutralized. The path was clear. Now, Naruto said, his voice dropping, all traces of levity gone. Arlong. The 5th floor was silent. The sounds of battle below were distant and muffled. This room was Nami's cage, her workshop, her hell. Maps were everywhere, tacked to the walls, stacked on desks, scattered on the floor. Charts of every island in the East Blue. Currents, wind patterns. 8 years of her life, stolen and rendered in ink. And in the center of the room, sitting on a gaudy, oversized throne, was Arlong. He was massive, far larger than any of his crew, his saw-like nose a vicious weapon, his skin a dark, menacing blue. He wasn't watching the battle. He was looking at a map on his lap, a cruel smirk on his face. He didn't even look up as Naruto and Nami entered, followed by the silent ranks of Team Gamma. "The witch returns," Arlong rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "And you brought a pet. A little human with some parlor tricks. I'll admit, the clones are a novel touch. But it changes nothing." He finally looked up, his yellow, predatory eyes locking onto Naruto. "You think because you can make copies of yourself, you are strong? You are an insect, trying to bite a dragon. We are fish men. The superior race. This world belongs to us. You humans are nothing but livestock." Nami flinched at the familiar, hateful rhetoric. But Naruto was unmoved. The golden glow of his six paths sage mode intensified slightly, bathing the room in a warm, powerful light. The crosshatch pattern in his eyes seemed to burn. "You talk a lot about strength," Naruto said, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. "But all I see is a coward. A bully who preys on people who can't fight back. You build your throne on the backs of others, you drink their tears and call it power. You're pathetic." Arlong's smirk vanished, replaced by a snarl of pure fury. In a single, explosive movement, he was on his feet. He grabbed his weapon, a massive, double-edged saw-toothed blade called the Kurabachi. "I will show you the power of a fishman. I'll grind your bones into dust." He lunged. He wasn't just fast, he was a force of nature. The floorboards cracked under his feet as he closed the distance in an instant, swinging the Kurabachi in a devastating arc aimed at Naruto's neck. Naruto didn't move. He simply raised his hand. He caught the massive, multi-ton blade between his thumb and forefinger. The Kurabachi stopped, inches from his face. The force of the blow created a shockwave that blasted Nami's maps off the walls, sending paper flying everywhere. But the blade itself was held fast, trembling from the contained kinetic energy. Arlong stared, his eyes bulging with disbelief. His ultimate weapon, his symbol of power, stopped by 2 fingers. "Weak," Naruto said, his voice flat. He flicked his wrist. The Kurabachi shattered into 1,000 pieces of glittering steel. Arlong roared in frustration and rage, abandoning the broken hilt and launching himself forward, his hands becoming claws, his teeth bared. "Shark on darts," he bellowed, propelling himself like a torpedo. Naruto vanished. He reappeared behind Arlong, his foot gently tapping the fishman's back. Arlong shot past, crashing headfirst through the wall of the tower, leaving a massive, fish-shaped hole. He dangled there for a moment before pulling himself back in, bleeding from a dozen cuts, his eyes wild with madness. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you all," he screamed, his sanity fraying. He ripped a massive wooden pillar from the floor and swung it like a club. Naruto just sighed. "I'm done listening to you." He raised his right hand. A sphere of swirling, chaotic blue energy began to form in his palm, a miniature hurricane of pure chakra. It whirred with a high-pitched, harmonic shriek. "A Rasengan. You wanted to see real power?" Naruto said, his voice suddenly resonating with the force of a god. "This is the power of will. The power of bonds. The power of a promise." He moved forward, not with a burst of speed, but with the inexorable force of a glacier. Arlong swung the pillar. The Rasengan met it. The pillar didn't just break, it disintegrated into sawdust. The swirling sphere continued on, slamming into Arlong's chest. The impact was absolute. There was no explosion, just a deep, grinding roar of overwhelming force. Arlong's eyes went wide with a final, silent understanding of the chasm in their power. The Rasengan carried him backward, through his own throne, shattering it into splinters. It carried him through the back wall of the tower, and out into the open air. For a moment, he was suspended against the rising sun, a silhouette of defeat, before the Rasengan propelled him downward, crashing him into the very foundations of Arlong Park with the force of a meteor. The entire fortress groaned and collapsed in on itself, a monument of tyranny falling to ruin. Silence. The clones below had vanished, their job done. The battle was over. The surviving fishmen, their leader defeated, their spirit broken, were already surrendering. In the wreckage of the fifth floor, Naruto stood, his hands still outstretched, the golden glow of his power slowly fading. The sun was rising, its first rays streaming through the hole in the wall, illuminating the chaos of flying paper. Nami was on her knees, her staff lying forgotten beside her. She wasn't looking at Naruto. She was looking at the blizzard of her own maps, swirling around the room like dead leaves. 8 years of her life, drifting on the wind. She slowly got to her feet and walked over to a drafting table that had somehow survived. She picked up a G-pen, her fingers tracing its familiar shape. Then, with a strangled cry that was half grief and half rage, she swept everything off the table. She kicked it over. She tore the maps from the walls, ripping them to shreds. She was destroying her prison, piece by piece, her movements frantic, cathartic. Naruto watched her, his expression unreadable. He didn't move to stop her. He understood. This was a necessary exorcism. When her fury was spent, she stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily, tears finally streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of release. It was over. It was finally, truly over. She was free. Later, as the sun climbed higher into the sky, the people of Kokoyashi celebrated amidst the ruins of their fear. But Nami wasn't with them. Naruto found her where he knew she would be. In the quiet grove, standing before a simple grave marked by a pinwheel. Belmir. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just standing there, looking at the name carved into the stone, an expression of profound, hollow emptiness on her face. I did it, Belmir, she whispered to the grave. I got the money. It's buried back at the grove. It's useless now. She gave a short, bitter laugh. I spent my whole life chasing a finish line, and now that I've crossed it, I don't know where to go. She looked at Naruto as he approached, her eyes lost. What do I do now? Naruto stood beside her, looking not at her, but at the grave. He didn't offer empty platitudes or easy answers. He offered something more valuable. The truth. For the longest time, he began, his voice soft, I was alone. I was the container for the nine-tailed fox that destroyed my village. Everyone looked at me, but they never saw me. They saw a monster. A weapon. A curse that had to be tolerated. Nami listened, her breath catching. So I acted out, he continued, a faint, sad smile on his lips. I pulled pranks. I painted monuments. I yelled about how I was going to be the leader of the village, the Hokage, so everyone would have to acknowledge me. I was loud, and obnoxious, and always smiling. He looked at her, his blue eyes filled with a deep, shared understanding. Because if I stopped, if I was quiet for even a second, the silence, the loneliness, it would have swallowed me whole. The smile was my mask. My armor. Nami's eyes widened. The greedy, money-obsessed witch. The loud, obnoxious idiot. They were the same. Two children, building walls around their hearts to survive a world that had hurt them. In that moment, she felt more seen, more understood, than she had in her entire life. He saw her gaze drop to her shoulder, to the hated mark hidden beneath her shirt. The symbol of Arlong. Her brand. A mark doesn't define you, he said gently. Unless you let it. He pointed to the pinwheel on the grave. That pinwheel. And the tangerines from your grove. I saw you drawing them on the corners of your charts. They mean something to you, don't they? They're a part of who you really are. He took a step closer. Don't let his mark be the last word. Cover it. Erase it with something that's yours. Something that gives you strength. Later, as Genzo, his hand surprisingly steady, worked with his ink and needles in the quiet of his office. Naruto stood by the door, a silent guardian. Genzo was tattooing over the jagged lines of the shark, transforming it. The new design was a swirl of blue and orange, a pinwheel to remember Belmere, and a tangerine to remember her home. A symbol not of slavery, but of love and survival. When it was done, Nami looked at her reflection in a small mirror, her fingers tracing the new, beautiful art on her shoulder. The ugly scar of her past was gone, replaced by a testament to her strength. She looked up, her eyes meeting Naruto's in the reflection. She offered him a small, watery, but genuine smile. It was the first one he had ever seen from her, and it was more brilliant than the morning sun. He had promised to set her free. He hadn't realized that in doing so, he was starting to find a new anchor for his own unmoored soul. Chapter 3, A New Course. A shadowed wake. The celebration that engulfed Kokoyashi village was a thing of raw, unadulterated catharsis. It was not a planned festival, it was a spontaneous explosion of joy, a pressure valve of fear and sorrow released after 8 agonizing years. Music, played on rustic fiddles and hammered on overturned barrels, was clumsy and off-key but filled with a jubilant energy that was impossible to resist. The air, once thick with unspoken dread, now carried the rich, savory smoke of roasting sea boar and the sweet, sharp scent of tangerines, which were handed out freely by the cartload. Villagers laughed with tears streaming down their faces, hugging neighbors they had previously only shared looks of grim solidarity with. Children, who had grown up learning to walk quietly and speak in whispers, shrieked and chased each other through the streets, their small feet pounding on the dirt with a freedom they had never known. The world had been returned to them, vibrant and full of color. Naruto watched it all from the tiled roof of Genzo's house. He sat with his legs crossed, a quiet observer amidst the joyful chaos. He had politely declined a dozen offers of food and drink, not out of aloofness, but because this moment wasn't his. It belonged to them. His part was done. He was the storm that had passed, leaving behind a clear, bright sky. The feeling was familiar, the quiet aftermath of a battle won, the silent satisfaction of a promise kept. But it was tinged with an aching loneliness. In his world, after a mission, there was always a place to return to. A village. A home. Friends who would drag him to Ichiraku for a celebratory bowl of ramen. Here, there was only the vast, unknowable sea. He was a hero without a home, a king without a country. A ghost at a feast. Hiding. The voice startled him from his reverie. Nami was climbing onto the roof, moving with the easy, sure-footed grace of a cat. She was wearing a simple blue shirt and pants, her new tattoo visible on her shoulder, a vibrant mark of defiance. The haunted, brittle mask she had worn for so long was gone. In its place was a hesitant, fragile openness. Her eyes, the color of warm chocolate, held a light he hadn't seen before. "Just getting a better view," he replied, patting the spot beside him. She sat down, her shoulder almost brushing his. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the celebration below. "They're calling you the Golden Hurricane," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Because of your hair and, well." She gestured vaguely towards the direction of the obliterated Arlong Park. He chuckled softly. "It's a bit dramatic. I prefer Naruto." "Me too," she said quietly. She fiddled with a loose thread on her pants. "Thank you." The words were small, but they carried the weight of a lifetime of gratitude. "I know I said it before, but I don't think you understand what you've done. You didn't just defeat Arlong. You gave us back our future. You were the one fighting for it all along," he countered, looking at her. "You just needed someone to clear the last obstacle out of your way." Her smile wavered, and she looked down at her hands. "Now that it's clear, I have no idea which way to go. For 8 years, my whole world was about getting to 100 million berries. That was the only direction I had." She looked up, her gaze sweeping over the horizon, towards the endless blue. My real dream, was always to draw a map of the whole world. But now that I can actually do it, it's terrifying. The world is so big. It is, Naruto agreed, his own gaze following hers. His voice was filled with a wistful ache. Bigger than you can possibly imagine. Before she could ask what he meant, a commotion erupted from the direction of the shore. A new sound, a loud, whooping cry of "Land," followed by the distinctive thwomp-sprowing of a slingshot. A small figure, a red and blue blur, shot through the air from a ship anchored just off the coast, a bizarre vessel with a sheep's head for a figurehead, and landed with a bouncy thud in the middle of the village square. The party lurched to a halt, the music sputtering out as everyone stared. The figure was a young man, a boy really, with a shock of black hair, wide, innocent eyes, and a straw hat perched on his head. A huge, infectious grin split his face as he took in the scene. "Wow! A party! And it smells like meat," he declared, his nose twitching like a bloodhound's. Nami groaned, burying her face in her hands. "Oh, no. Not him." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "You know him?" "I traveled with him for a bit," she muttered, her voice muffled. "He's a pirate. A well-meaning, rubber-brained idiot, but a pirate nonetheless. His name is Luffy." As if on cue, 3 more figures made their way up from the beach. The first was a green-haired man with 3 swords strapped to his hip, who was inexplicably walking in the opposite direction of the village. The second, a lanky boy with a long nose and a slingshot, was looking around with wide, fearful eyes. The third, a blond man in a sharp black suit with a strange, curly eyebrow, lit a cigarette and immediately honed in on Nami with the laser-like focus of a predator spotting its prey. "Nami-swayan," the blond man cried, his demeanor shifting into a love-struck, noodle-like wiggle. "I knew I'd find you. My beautiful, radiant melon." The green-haired swordsman, realizing he was going the wrong way, changed direction and finally arrived, looking bored. "So this is the place. Took you long enough to deal with your problem, Nami?" I was just scouting ahead," the long-nosed boy stammered, joining the group. "Yes. To make sure it was safe for the great Captain Usopp." Luffy, meanwhile, had already zeroed in on the roasted sea boar and was attempting to swallow a whole leg in one go, his cheeks stretching to an impossible degree. The villagers stared, unsure whether to be terrified or amused. This, Naruto thought with a strange sense of detachment, was the most chaotic group of people he had ever seen. And after the Akatsuki and the Fourth Great Ninja War, that was saying something. Nami sighed, a long-suffering sound. "I should probably go deal with this." She started to climb down, but paused, looking back at Naruto. "Don't go anywhere. I might need backup." Naruto just smiled and gave a small nod. He watched as she descended and was immediately accosted by the swirly-eyebrowed cook, Sanji, who offered her a flower he'd seemingly produced from nowhere. He saw her arguing with the swordsman, Zoro, and smacking the captain, Luffy, on the head to get him to stop inhaling all the food. It was a bizarre, dysfunctional, but strangely familial scene. Luffy, rubbing the lump on his head, suddenly froze. His wide, grinning face turned serious for the first time. He stopped chewing. His gaze lifted, passing over the crowd, over Nami, and landed directly on Naruto, still sitting on the roof. There was no animosity in the look. There was recognition. It was the same way powerful, perceptive shinobi could sometimes sense each other's presence. Luffy couldn't sense chakra, but he could sense something. A presence. A weight. A power that hummed in the air like a plucked string. Without a word to his crew, Luffy stretched his arm, it elongated like rubber, snagging a roof beam, and launched himself upwards, landing with a soft thwack of his sandals on the tiles right in front of Naruto. "Whoa," Luffy breathed, his eyes wide with childlike wonder. "You're all glowy." Naruto blinked. He had let the barest remnant of his sage mode linger, a subconscious habit of remaining aware of his surroundings. To a normal person, it was unnoticeable. To this strange rubber boy, it was apparently a visible aura. "You're strong," Luffy stated, not a question, but a fact. He pointed a finger at Naruto. "Really, really strong. Stronger than Smokey. Stronger than anyone I've ever met." His grin returned, wide and blinding. "My name's Monkey D. Luffy. I'm the man who's gonna be king of the pirates. You should join my crew." The offer was so blunt, so sudden, it was almost charming. Naruto looked at this boy, this self-proclaimed future king. He saw no malice, no greed for power, no lust for conquest. He saw an immense, unshakable will, as simple and as powerful as the rising sun. It was the will to be free. It was a spirit startlingly similar to his own, just pointed in a different direction. He was intrigued. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he replied, his voice even. "And I'm not a pirate." "Doesn't matter," Luffy declared cheerfully. "You're strong and you helped Nami. That makes you a good guy. So you should join." "Luffy, get down from there. You're bothering him," Nami yelled from below, exasperated. Naruto chuckled, the sound genuine and relaxed. "It's all right, Nami. We're just talking." He looked back at Luffy. "I appreciate the offer. But I have my own path to walk." Luffy pouted for a second, then shrugged. "Okay. But if you change your mind, let me know." He plopped down beside Naruto, grabbing a piece of meat from a pocket Naruto hadn't even noticed he had. "So, how'd you beat the fish guy? Did you go Goma Goma no pistol on him? Or did you do your own thing? Your glowy thing looks cool." The conversation was surreal. This boy, who radiated a strange but undeniable power, was as straightforward and guileless as a child. He spoke of battle like it was a game, of strength like it was a fun toy. Naruto found himself explaining, in the simplest possible terms, that he had just hit him. As they spoke, new disturbance arose from the edge of the village. This one was not joyful. It was the sound of marching feet and the arrogant shouting of orders. A contingent of Marines had arrived. They were led by a man who looked more like a rodent than a human, with a pinched face, beady eyes, and long whiskers. He wore a captain's coat, but it seemed too big for him, as if he were a child playing dress-up. "This is Marine business," the captain squeaked, shoving Genzo aside. "This island is under the jurisdiction of the 16th branch. I am Captain Nezumi. We've received a report that the pirate Arlong has been defeated. All of his accumulated treasure is now property of the world government." Nami stepped forward, her face hardening. "That treasure belongs to this village. It's the money Arlong stole from us." Nezumi sneered, his whiskers twitching. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, little girl. And right now, my men and I are in possession." He leered at her. "In fact, I seem to recall a deal I had with Arlong. He paid me a tidy sum to look the other way. Since he's gone, it seems you've inherited his debt. I'll be confiscating all of it as evidence. It was corruption so blatant, so shameless, it was almost comical." The villagers, who had just been celebrating their freedom, felt a familiar chill of fear and helplessness return. The uniforms were different, but the attitude was the same. Luffy, on the roof, scowled. "Hey, that mouse guy is trying to steal Nami's money." He cracked his knuckles. "I'm gonna go punch him." He was about to launch himself off the roof when Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder. "No," Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm. "Let me." Naruto stood up. He didn't jump. He simply stepped off the edge of the roof. He fell the 20 feet to the ground, landing as silently as a falling leaf, his knees barely bending. He came to a stop directly in front of the sneering Marine captain. The air grew heavy. the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Nezumi, who had been enjoying his power trip, found himself looking into a pair of the coldest blue eyes he had ever seen. There was no anger in them. There was no emotion at all. It was the flat, empty gaze of a predator looking at something utterly insignificant. "Who the hell are you?" Nezumi squeaked, trying to maintain his bravado. "Another pirate? I'll have you all arrested." "You're going to turn around," Naruto said, his voice low and level. "You and your men are going to get back on your ship. You're going to sail away. You will file a report that says Arlong Park was destroyed by a rogue tidal wave. You will state that there was no treasure, and that Kokoyashi village is of no strategic or financial interest. You will forget this island, and my friends, exist. Am I clear?" Nezumi sputtered, his face turning purple. "Are you threatening a marine captain? I'll have your head for this. Men, seize him." The Marines hesitantly raised their rifles. They didn't fire. They couldn't. The pressure emanating from the blonde man was a physical force, making it hard to breathe, making their trigger fingers feel like lead. Naruto sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "I was trying to be reasonable." He didn't move. He didn't even look at the Marines. He simply let a fraction of his power flare. One of his truth-seeking orbs, a sphere of perfect blackness, detached from behind his back. It floated lazily beside his head, humming with a sound that wasn't a sound, a vibration that seemed to warp the air around it. It pulsed once, a silent beat of absolute negation. Nezumi felt it in his soul. It was a glimpse into the void. A vision of non-existence, of being utterly and completely erased from reality. His mind, small and petty, couldn't comprehend it. All it knew was a terror so profound and primal that his bladder let go. A dark stain spread across the front of his pristine white trousers. His men, feeling the same terrifying pulse, dropped their rifles and scrambled backward, their faces pale with shock. Naruto continued, his voice as calm as ever while the orb of nothingness hovered beside his face, "You can stay. And I can teach you the real meaning of the word evidence." Nezumi stared at the black sphere, then at Naruto's empty eyes, and his brain finally rebooted with a singular, overwhelming command: survive. He shrieked, a high-pitched, rodent-like sound of pure terror. He spun around and fled, scrambling and slipping in the mud, his men hot on his heels. They didn't stop until they had piled back onto their boat and cast off, rowing with a panicked frenzy that suggested a sea king was chasing them. The black orb retracted, disappearing behind Naruto's back. The oppressive pressure vanished. The sun felt warm again. The village was silent for a beat, and then it erupted in laughter. It was a different kind of laughter from before, not just joyful, but liberated. They weren't just free from Arlong. They were free from the fear that had defined their world. Naruto turned back to the crowd. Nami was staring at him, her mouth slightly agape. Luffy was laughing his head off, pounding his fists on the roof tiles. Shishishi. He made the mouse guy pee his pants. Awesome. Zoro looked at Naruto with a new, sharp interest, his hand resting on the hilt of his swords. Sanji had dropped his flower, his cigarette hanging forgotten from his lips. Usopp was hiding behind a barrel, muttering about gods of destruction. This man, Naruto, was not just strong. He was something else entirely. Something ancient and powerful and utterly beyond their comprehension. And he was on their side. Later, as the sun began to set, the Straw Hat Pirates were preparing to leave. The party had finally wound down, the villagers retiring to their homes, exhausted but happy. The Going Merry was restocked with water and food, courtesy of Sanji, who had commandeered a kitchen and whipped up a feast that left the villagers in awe. Nami stood on the shore, watching them. Luffy was perched on the sheep's figurehead, Zoro was napping on the deck, and Usopp was polishing his slingshot. Sanji was carefully packing away the last of the supplies. They were leaving. And she was staying. It was what she wanted. It was her home. She was finally, truly home. But the thought of them sailing away, of the endless horizon swallowing their small, strange ship, filled her with a profound and unexpected panic. The world was big, and it was filled with monsters. Arlong was just one of them. The Marines were corrupt. The Grand Line, which she so longed to chart, was 1,000 times more dangerous. She looked over at Naruto. He was standing by the tangerine grove, talking quietly with Nojiko, her sister. He looked at peace, but she could see it now, the subtle solitude. The way he stood as if a part of him was always watching, always separate. He was an island, just like her. What would he do now? Stay here. In this small, quiet village. A being of his power, a golden hurricane, confined to a peaceful island in the East Blue. It felt wrong. It felt like caging a god. Would he just leave? Wander the world alone? The thought of him, alone in this strange, hostile world, sent a sharp pang through her chest. It was the same feeling she got when she thought of her crewmates sailing into danger without a navigator. It was a feeling of responsibility. Of connection. Her path was clear now, but it felt empty. She had her freedom, but she realized with a jolt that freedom wasn't just about being untethered. It was about choosing your own anchors. She made a decision. It was impulsive, terrifying, and felt more right than anything she had ever done. She walked over to Naruto, her heart pounding. Nojiko saw her approaching and gave her a knowing, encouraging smile before tactfully excusing herself. "They're leaving," Nami said, her voice small. "I see that," Naruto replied, his gaze soft. "You're staying, then? With your family?" "This will always be my home," she said, taking a deep breath. "But, it's not my whole world. Not anymore." She looked him directly in the eye, her own reflecting the fiery colors of the sunset. "My dream is to draw a map of the world. And their dream," she gestured to the ship, "is to sail it. Luffy wants to get to the end of the Grand Line. They need a navigator." "They do," he agreed, waiting. "But the Grand Line is dangerous," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "It's full of people like Arlong, and worse. People like that Marine captain. And whatever you are, you attract trouble. That black orb thing, that wasn't normal. People will come for you. Powerful people. They will," he confirmed, his expression unreadable. This was it. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them, her resolve firm. "So. I can't go with them. Not without you." The words hung in the air, more shocking, more revealing, than any declaration of affection. "I need a navigator to help me chart this world," she said, her voice pleading now. "And they need a bodyguard who can make Marine captains wet themselves. And you need a crew. You need a place to belong. You can't just wander around alone. You'll go crazy. Or get captured. Or both." She took a step closer, her hand instinctively reaching out, her fingers brushing his arm. "So come with us. Please, Naruto. Come with me." Naruto looked at her, at the desperate hope in her eyes. He looked at the strange ship with its ridiculous figurehead. He saw Luffy waving a cheerful, clueless goodbye. He saw Zoro and Sanji starting one of their pointless arguments. He saw a chaotic, dysfunctional, fiercely loyal family. A found family. Something he knew all too well. He was adrift. A shinobi without a village. He had no mission, no purpose here. But Nami had just given him one. Stay by her side. Protect her and this new, strange family she had found. And in doing so, maybe he could find a new home for himself. A new path. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "A map of the whole world, huh?" he said. "That sounds like a long trip. You'll definitely need a good bodyguard. The relief that washed over Nami's face was so profound it almost brought her to her knees. She just nodded, unable to speak, a wide, brilliant grin her only answer. "Hey! Luffy!" Naruto yelled, his voice carrying across the water with surprising power. Luffy, who had been about to give the order to set sail, perked up. "You've got a navigator," Naruto called out. "And you've got me, too. For now." Luffy's grin stretched impossibly wide. "Yahoo! I knew it. I got the glowy guy and Nami. We've got the best crew ever." As Nami and Naruto waded out to the ship, helped aboard by a swooning Sanji and a grinning Luffy, she felt a sense of rightness settle in her soul. Her course was set. It was a terrifying, unknown, and dangerous course. But as she stood on the deck of the Going Merry, the setting sun at her back and the quiet, powerful stranger by her side, she wasn't afraid. For the first time in a very long time, she was excited for the journey. Far away, in the cold, silent expanse of the Grand Line, the world was a different color. Here, there was no warm sun, only the cold, analytical glow of data screens. The ship was a marvel of dark, sleek engineering, a ghost on the waves, invisible to both eye and transponder snail. Inside, in a sterile white room known as the Anomaly Analysis Chamber, a woman stood before a holographic display. She was tall and slender, dressed in a form-fitting, severe black uniform that bore no insignia. Her silver hair was cut in a brutally sharp, asymmetrical bob, and her eyes, the color of pale amethyst, were cold and devoid of emotion. Her name was Stiletto, Lord Aeon's chief intelligence analyst. On the hologram before her, data streams scrolled at an impossible speed. They were the energy readings her deep-range sensors had picked up from the East Blue. "From Arlong Park. Report," she said, her voice a clipped, toneless monotone. "Energy Event XB-7 confirmed," a synthesized voice from the terminal replied. "Origin point, Konomi Islands. Initial energy yield from clone materialization exceeds the output of a buster call by a factor of 10. Final energy discharge from primary combat event is unquantifiable. The metrics do not exist." Stiletto's face remained impassive, but she tapped a command into the console. A new set of data appeared. Cross-referencing with known energy signatures, the terminal intoned. Negative match for all known devil fruit classifications, Logia, Paramecia, Zoan. Negative match for all known variants of Haki. Energy composition is non-baryonic, exhibiting properties that violate the laws of conservation and thermodynamics. It appears to be biological in origin, yet functions as a controlled violation of reality. Source? Stiletto asked. The hologram shifted, displaying a grainy, long-range thermal image captured by a high-altitude surveillance drone. It was a figure, glowing with an internal fire, standing amidst the wreckage of Arlong Park. A blonde-haired man in an orange jacket. The anomaly. Subject designated, Maelstrom, the terminal reported. Current location, aboard the vessel Going Merry, a pirate ship captained by Monkey D. Luffy. Course set for Reverse Mountain. Stiletto watched the glowing figure on the screen for a long, silent moment. Her world, her master's world, was one of order. Of control. Of pruning the overgrown chaos of reality to achieve a state of perfect, silent peace. Devil fruits were a known variable. Haki was a predictable element. The world government and its bumbling corruption, the four emperors and their brutish territorial disputes, all of it was part of a known, flawed equation. This was new. This was a number that didn't belong. A variable from outside the system. An anomaly that had the potential to unbalance everything. She turned away from the screen and walked to a polished black communication snail on a sterile steel table. She picked up the receiver. After a moment of silence, a voice answered. It was a calm, melodic voice, but it held an ancient coldness that could freeze stars. Report, Stiletto, the voice of Lord Aeon commanded. "My lord," she said, her tone unwavering. "The anomaly has been confirmed. It is a biological entity of unknown origin, wielding a power that subverts physical law. It is an agent of absolute chaos, far exceeding the parameters of a simple pirate." There was a pause on the other end. "Designation?" "Maelstrom," Stiletto replied. "It is moving. It has allied itself with other minor agents of chaos." The voice on the other end was silent for another long moment, considering. "An anomaly cannot be permitted to fester," Lord Aeon finally said. "It threatens the Great Silence. Observe it. Test it. Understand the nature of its power. I will dispatch Salas to the Sky Islands. He will prepare a crucible. We will see if this maelstrom can be erased, or if it must be unmade." "As you command, Lord Aeon," Stiletto said. She placed the receiver back. The line went dead. Her amethyst eyes turned back to the screen, to the glowing figure of Naruto Uzumaki. The hunt had begun. Chapter 4, The City of Beginnings and the Smoking Man. Reverse Mountain was an absurdity. A defiance of logic, gravity, and common sense all rendered in stone and seawater. Naruto stood at the bow of the Going Merry, his hand resting on the carved head of the sheep figurehead, and watched as their small ship was dragged upward by a current that flowed, impossibly, to the summit of a mountain. The roar of the water was deafening, the spray a constant, chilling mist. Beside him, Luffy was perched on his favorite seat, laughing his head off, arms spread wide as if to embrace the sheer madness of it all. "See? Isn't it great? Shishishi." Usopp was lashed to the mast, screaming in terror. Zoro was asleep, somehow, leaning against the railing as if this were a gentle afternoon sail. Sanji was below decks, ensuring his precious galley was secure from the violent lurching. And Nami. Nami was in her element. She stood at the ship's wheel, her knuckles white but her eyes bright with exhilaration and intense focus. This wasn't just sailing, this was a battle against nature itself. She shouted orders, reading the churning water, feeling the ship's response through the wood, her hair whipping around her face in the wind. "Hard to starboard. A whirlpool is forming on the port side," she yelled, her voice cutting through the roar. Naruto didn't need to be told. He could feel it. Not with the chakra sensing of his old world, but with a new sense he was rapidly developing. He could feel the wild, untamed natural energy of the ocean, the immense power churning beneath them. It was like standing next to a sleeping-tailed beast, a raw, primal force that demanded respect. He pressed his palm against the figurehead, letting a sliver of his own chakra flow into the wood, subtly reinforcing it against the incredible pressure. It was a small act, unnoticed by anyone, but it eased the groaning of the ship's timbers. He glanced at Nami. The fear and exhaustion that had clung to her like a shroud were gone, burned away by the thrill of her craft. She was a navigator, a master of the sea, and here, in this impossible place, she was a queen on her throne. The sight sent a strange warmth through his chest, a feeling of protective pride. They crested the summit, hanging in a moment of weightless silence as four massive channels of water converged. Then, with a stomach-lurching drop, they were plunging down the other side, shooting out into a new sea under a new sky. The Grand Line. The air itself felt different here. Thicker. Charged with a chaotic energy that made the hair on Naruto's arms stand up. The weather was a schizophrenic mess, snow fell on one side of the ship while the other was bathed in brilliant sunshine. Islands of impossible shapes and sizes dotted the horizon. This was a world that didn't just break the rules of nature, it rewrote them on a whim. "Welcome," Nami said, a wide, triumphant grin on her face as she finally let go of the wheel, her shoulders slumping with relieved exhaustion, to paradise. Their first stop was a necessary one. They needed supplies, a log posed to navigate the treacherous magnetic fields of the Grand Line, and, according to Luffy, a cool bronze statue. Their destination, Logue Town, the city of beginnings and endings. The last place the Pirate King, Gold, Roger, had seen before his execution. The city was a bustling, vibrant port, a stark contrast to the oppressed quiet of Kokoyasi. The streets were a riot of color and sound, filled with sailors, merchants, pirates, and bounty hunters. The air smelled of salt, tar, and 100 different kinds of street food. For the first time since his arrival, Naruto felt a sense of normalcy, a welcome anonymity in the jostling crowd. The crew split up, a decision that Naruto, with his shinobi instincts for unit cohesion, found deeply unsettling. But Luffy was adamant. "It's more fun this way. We'll meet back at the ship by sunset. Don't get lost, Zoro," Luffy declared, before rocketing off in the direction of a towering scaffold in the central square, the execution platform. Zoro, predictably, grunted and walked off in the completely opposite direction of the sword shop Nami had pointed out to him. Usopp and Sanji went their own ways, one looking for legendary sniper gear, the other for exotic ingredients from the four seas. That left Naruto and Nami. "Babysitting duty?" Naruto asked, a teasing glint in his eye. "Someone has to make sure you don't accidentally buy an island or start a war," she retorted, though her lips twitched into a smile. "Come on. The first thing we need is a log pose. Everything else is secondary." They walked together through the crowded marketplace. The dynamic between them had shifted. In Kokoyasi, he was her savior, a figure of immense, terrifying power. On the ship, he was a quiet, watchful passenger. Here, in the press of the crowd, they were something else. Two people. A man and a woman, simply walking together. The initial awkwardness gave way to a comfortable rhythm. He was a fish out of water, utterly ignorant of the world around him, and she, surprisingly, found his cluelessness endearing. He stared at a transponder snail with the baffled curiosity of a scholar discovering a new species, recoiling slightly when it blinked at him. "It's a phone," she explained, trying and failing to suppress a giggle. "You talk into it." "It's alive," he stated, poking it gently. "How does it?" "You know what, never mind." His questions were endless and refreshingly direct. "Why is that man's head so long? Is that bird delivering mail? What is a berry and why does everyone want so many of them?" Nami, who had spent years using her knowledge as a weapon or a tool for survival, found herself enjoying the simple act of explaining her world to him. It made her see it through fresh eyes. The bizarre was mundane, the dangerous was normal. In turn, he offered her glimpses of his own world, speaking not of the grand battles, but of the small things. He described the festival of a winter's night in his village, the way lanterns were painted with wishes and sent down a river. He talked about the dango shop that was always closed when you wanted it most, and the grumpy old man who ran the weapons store but had the softest spot for kids. He painted a picture of a world that was just as strange, but in a completely different way. They found a navigational shop. A dusty old place cluttered with astrolabes and sea charts. The log pose was a strange contraption, a compass with a sphere of glass on a wristband, a needle floating inside pointing not north, but towards the magnetic signature of the next island in their chain. "It'll take about a day to set," the shopkeeper, a wizened old man, explained. "Once it does, it'll point you to Whiskey Peak. Don't try to go to another island before then, or you'll be lost forever." Nami paid for it with some of the money she'd liberated from a group of boastful pirates on the way to the shop, a sleight-of-hand maneuver so smooth Naruto almost missed it. He just raised an eyebrow. She gave him a wink. Old habits. As they left the shop, she strapped the log pose to her wrist, looking at it with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "This is it," she breathed. "The key to the whole world." Naruto watched her, a genuine smile on his face. He saw the brilliant, adventurous girl she must have been before Arlong, now finally allowed to resurface. He felt an overwhelming urge to give her something, a gift to mark this new beginning. His eyes scanned the bustling street. He saw vendors selling cheap jewelry, gaudy clothes, questionable street food. None of it felt right. Then he saw it. Tucked away between a fishmonger and a rowdy bar was a small, quiet storefront. Its sign was simple: hand-carved wood, Cartographers' Guild, finest tools and inks. "Wait here," he said, before slipping inside. He emerged a few minutes later, holding a long, beautifully crafted wooden case. He presented it to her without a word. Nami opened it, her breath catching in her throat. Inside, nestled in plush velvet, was a complete set of master-grade cartography tools. The G-pens were made of polished cherry wood, their nibs crafted from iridescent seastone that was said to never dull. There were compasses and rulers of gleaming brass, and a set of ink pots filled with vibrant, permanent colors she had only ever dreamed of affording. It was not just a set of tools, it was a work of art. And it must have cost a fortune. "Naruto, how?" she whispered, looking up at him, her eyes shining. "I have the money, you didn't need to. I don't have any of your berries," he said simply. He held up his hand, where a small, intricate cut was already healing. "I traded them a sample of my blood." The man said it had unique regenerative properties. He seemed to think it was a fair exchange. Nami stared at him, then at the case, then back at him. He'd sold his own blood, blood that was clearly part of his strange power, to buy her a gift. The sheer, unthinking generosity of it, the simple desire to see her happy, struck her with the force of a physical blow. Her face flushed, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the sun. "You're an idiot," she said, her voice thick with emotion. She closed the case, clutching it to her chest like the treasure it was. A complete and utter idiot. She wouldn't meet his eyes, but he could see the brilliant smile she was trying to hide. "Thank you." Their quiet moment was shattered by a scream from the direction of the town square. It was followed by a rising clamor of panicked shouts. "It's pirates! Someone call the Marines!" Nami and Naruto exchanged a look. "Luffy," they said in unison. They ran towards the square, Naruto easily keeping pace with her, his movements fluid and silent. The crowd was scattering, creating a wide circle around the execution platform. At the base of the platform, a group of garishly dressed pirates, led by a woman with a bright green bob cut and a massive iron club, were facing off against Zoro. The swordsman had his hand on his swords, a bored but dangerous look on his face. "Where's Buggy the Clown?" Zoro asked, his voice calm. "I have a bone to pick with him." "Captain Buggy is busy," the woman, Alvida, snarled. "But I'll be happy to crush you in his place." Up on the platform, the situation was more surreal. Luffy was trapped, his head and hands locked in a pillory, a grinning, blue-haired clown with a big red nose, Buggy, standing over him, a long saber held high. "Any last words, Straw Hat?" Buggy cackled. "This is what you get for messing with me." Luffy, impossibly, was grinning from ear to ear. He looked out at the sea, at the sky, and then he shouted, his voice filled not with fear, but with pure, unadulterated joy. "I'm the man who's going to be king of the pirates." Naruto and Nami skidded to a halt at the edge of the square. Nami was pale with panic. "Luffy! That idiot! What is he doing?" Naruto's eyes were fixed on the scene. He saw Luffy's genuine smile. He saw the acceptance, the lack of fear. It was the same look he'd seen on the faces of shinobi ready to die for their village. It was resolve. And he had no intention of letting that resolve be tested today. He was about to move, to intervene with the overwhelming speed he was capable of, when the air changed. It became heavy, thick with moisture and the smell of ozone. The sky, which had been clear moments before, was now a roiling mass of dark gray clouds. A storm was brewing, a freak squall appearing from nowhere. And then another presence made itself known. A thick, white plume of smoke billowed through the crowd, coalescing into the form of a man. He was tall, with stark white hair, a marine jacket draped over his broad shoulders like a cape, and 2 thick cigars clenched in his teeth. His eyes, sharp and intense, were fixed on the execution platform. "All of you pirates are the same," the man growled, his voice a low rumble. "You flock to this town like insects to a flame, thinking the legacy of a dead man will make you great. It only makes you easier to catch." Nami gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's him. Marine Captain Smoker. They say he's a devil fruit user, a Logia type. No one's ever landed a blow on him." Naruto's focus shifted from Luffy to this new arrival. Smoker. He could feel it now, the man's energy. It was different from a normal person's. It was diffuse, ephemeral, like a cloud. It wasn't the raw power of a warrior like Zoro, or the wild energy of Luffy. It was something, intangible. A new type of opponent. Interesting. Buggy brought his sword down. Die, Straw Hat. At the exact same moment, a bolt of lightning, brilliant and white-hot, lanced down from the churning sky. It struck the metal tip of the execution platform's roof. The lightning didn't just strike, it seemed to be drawn to the platform, a freak accident of impossible odds. The entire structure exploded in a shower of sparks and splintered wood. Luffy, miraculously unharmed, was thrown clear, the pillory shattered. He landed on his feet, blinking in surprise. "I'm alive," he cheered. Buggy and his crew were fried to a crisp, smoking and twitching on the ground. Naruto had felt the bolt coming. He had felt the massive, sudden spike of natural energy. But he hadn't interfered. There was something about it, something almost intentional. As if the world itself, or some force within it, had intervened to save the boy with the straw hat. The will of D. The voice of all things. He didn't know the names, but he recognized the phenomenon, fate. The heavens themselves are on his side, a cloaked figure murmured near the edge of the crowd, before melting back into the shadows. Naruto caught the briefest glimpse of a strange, cross-shaped tattoo on the man's face. Smoker was not impressed by acts of God. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Don't think you're getting away." He turned his attention from the smoking clowns to Luffy. "Straw Hat, your luck ends here." His lower body dissolved into a plume of thick white smoke. He shot across the square, reforming in front of a stunned Luffy. "White out," he bellowed, his arms turning to smoke and lashing out, enveloping Luffy in a choking cloud. "Luffy!" Nami screamed. But before the smoke could fully engulf him, a flash of orange intercepted it. Naruto appeared between Smoker and Luffy, his hand held up. He didn't try to block the smoke. He simply stood there, a calm anchor. In the churning white storm. The smoke washed over him, and for a moment, he was gone. But Smoker felt it. An anomaly. His smoke, which should have passed through the man as if he were air, met a strange, solid resistance. It wasn't a physical barrier. It was an energy field, a thin, almost invisible golden aura that coated Naruto's body. The smoke couldn't penetrate it. Naruto stepped out of the cloud, completely unharmed, his expression curious. "So this is a Logia," he mused, looking at his own hand. "Your body is made of smoke. Physical attacks won't work." Smoker reformed, his eyes wide with shock. No one had ever stood in the middle of his whiteout and just stood there. "What are you?" he growled, his cigar smoke puffing out in agitated clouds. "Another devil fruit user?" "Something like that," Naruto replied evasively. He couldn't sense the man's physical body. It was like trying to punch a cloud. But even a cloud had a source. It was made of something. Water vapor. Particulates. Energy. Smoker didn't wait for an answer. He moved again, this time with a weapon. The tip of his jutty, a metal truncheon tipped with sea stone, shot out at Naruto, propelled by a jet of smoke. Sea stone, the bane of all devil fruit users. Naruto saw the strange blue stone at the tip and his instincts, honed by countless battles, screamed danger. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was a weapon designed to negate abilities like his. He didn't try to block it with his aura. He simply sidestepped, the jutty hissing past his ear. "You're fast," Smoker noted, his eyes narrowing. "But you can't dodge forever." He dissolved into smoke again, moving to surround Naruto. "Don't need to," Naruto said, his eyes closing for a fraction of a second. He stopped trying to sense Smoker's body. Instead, he reached out with his Sage mode, and he sensed the natural energy within the smoke. It was faint, chaotic, but it was there. Smoker wasn't just turning into smoke, he was becoming one with an element. And any element was part of nature. Naruto's eyes snapped open. They were glowing, the pupils now horizontal bars. The golden aura around him intensified. He didn't coat his fist in haki, a concept he still didn't fully understand. He coated it in what he knew, natural energy. Pure, refined, and focused. Smoker materialized behind him, his fist a dense cloud of smoke aimed at the back of Naruto's head. "It's over." Naruto didn't turn around. He threw a backward punch, his fist glowing faintly. The impact was solid. There was a sickening crunch, and Smoker gasped, a real, pained sound of shock. He was thrown backward, not as smoke, but as a solid man, tumbling through the air and crashing into a market stall, sending fruit flying everywhere. He clutched his jaw, a trickle of blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. He stared at Naruto, his mind reeling with disbelief. He'd been hit. For the first time since he ate the plume fruit, a physical blow had connected. The square fell silent. The other Marines, Zoro, Sanji who had just arrived, even Luffy, everyone stared, stunned. They had just witnessed the impossible. Naruto looked at his fist, then at the shocked Marine captain. "I see," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "So that's how it works." Before Smoker could recover, a massive gust of wind, unnaturally strong and smelling of revolution, swept through the square. The cloaked man with the face tattoo stood on a nearby roof. "The government is not looking for you yet, Straw Hat," he called down. "Go. Continue on your path." The wind intensified, kicking up dust and debris, providing the perfect cover. "Now's our chance." Nami yelled, grabbing Luffy's arm. "To the ship. Everyone, run." The crew didn't need to be told twice. They broke into a sprint, Zoro and Sanji providing cover, Usopp already halfway to the port. Naruto fell back, walking backward, his eyes still locked on Smoker. The Marine was getting to his feet, his face a mask of grim fury and confusion. He wasn't just an enemy anymore, he was a puzzle. Naruto gave him a small, two-fingered salute, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another, before turning and vanishing in a blur of orange, easily catching up to his new crew. They scrambled aboard the Going Merry, casting off the ropes just as Smoker and his men reached the docks. The freak storm was already dissipating, the sky clearing as quickly as it had darkened. As the ship pulled away, sailing out into the vast expanse of the Grand Line, the crew was buzzing with excitement and adrenaline. "Did you see that?" Luffy yelled, bouncing on the deck. Naruto punched the smoky guy. He went flying. Shishishi. Zoro was cleaning his swords, but he kept glancing at Naruto with a look of profound respect and burgeoning rivalry. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice low. "I've fought Logias before. You can't touch them." "Everything is made of something," Naruto said cryptically, looking at his own hand. "You just have to know how to touch it." Nami stood beside him at the railing, her heart still pounding. She had seen him destroy Arlong's forces, but that was a battle of overwhelming power against pathetic bullies. This was different. He had faced an opponent who was conceptually unbeatable, a man who was like a ghost, and he had not only fought him, but he had learned him. He had solved the puzzle in the middle of the fight and won. Her gaze drifted from the fading log town to the man beside her. The gift he had given her, the beautiful cartography set, was safely stowed in her cabin. But the greater gift was the feeling of safety that emanated from him. It wasn't the safety of a cage. It was the safety of an unbreakable shield, one that allowed her the freedom to chase the horizon without fear. She found her hand creeping towards his. She stopped herself just before she made contact, a blush rising to her cheeks. Not yet. It was too soon. But the impulse was there, strong and undeniable. Naruto, sensing her movement, glanced down at their hands, almost touching. He didn't move away. He just looked at her, a soft, questioning look in his eyes. A new course was set. The log pose on Nami's wrist pointed the way to their next adventure. But for both of them, another compass, one deep in their hearts, was beginning to point towards something far more terrifying and wonderful, each other. The City of Beginnings had lived up to its name. Chapter 5, Whispers of a Desert King. The journey to Whiskey Peak was a lesson in the Grand Line's brutal whimsy. They were hailed by a pod of perpetually cheerful island-sized whales, narrowly escaped a hailstorm of candy-colored frogs, and were forced by Nami's iron-fisted navigation to steer clear of an island where the volcanoes erupted with lime gelatin. To Naruto, it was a world sketched by a drunken god, a constant barrage of delightful and terrifying absurdities. He found himself laughing more than he had in years, a deep, genuine sound that surprised even himself. Whiskey Peak was a trap, of course. The moment they docked and were greeted with a citywide party in their honor, Naruto's shinobi senses screamed ambush. The smiles of the townspeople were too wide, their hospitality too aggressive. He tasted a drop of the ale they were offered and detected the potent sedative in it instantly. "Don't drink or eat anything," he murmured to Nami as Luffy and Zoro engaged in a ridiculous pirate hunting contest against the Baroque Works bounty hunters masquerading as locals. "This whole town is a spider's web." She nodded, her eyes sharp and analytical. "I figured. No one is this happy to see pirates unless they want something. Your bounty, most likely." The fight, when it came, was a farce. Naruto watched, bemused, as Zoro single-handedly dismantled 100 bounty hunters while complaining about being woken up. Naruto didn't even need to intervene. His only action was to appear behind a terrified Igaram, the disguised mayor, just as he was about to fire a cannon at the Straw Hats, and gently take the lit match from his hand. "I don't think you want to do that," he'd said, his voice calm. The subsequent revelation about the Kingdom of Alabasta, the secret organization Baroque Works, and the nefarious plot of a warlord named Crocodile to instigate a civil war was a deluge of information. They learned of a princess, Vivi, desperately trying to save her country from a civil war orchestrated from the shadows. In the Going Mary's small galley, with a shaken but determined Vivi laying out the desperate situation, the mood was grim. She spoke of a rebellion born of drought and desperation, of a beloved king being framed as a villain, all manipulated by a shadowy figure she only knew as Mr. Zero. "He's one of the 7 warlords of the sea," Vivi explained, her voice trembling. "His name is Sir Crocodile. He's a hero to the people, but it's all a lie. He's the one who's been causing the drought with his secret dance powder operations, and he's arming both the royal army and the rebel army to make them destroy each other. He wants to take over my country." Luffy, surprisingly, was picking his nose, looking bored. "So we just have to beat up this crocodile guy, right?" "It's not that simple, Luffy." Nami snapped, her brow furrowed in worry. "He's a warlord. That's like one of the strongest pirates in the world, working for the government. And this is a whole country, with armies and millions of people. We can't just punch our way through a civil war." Naruto had been silent throughout the explanation, his fingers steepled in front of him, his eyes closed. He was processing. The scenario was tragically familiar. A hidden leader manipulating 2 sides against each other for personal gain. A nation being torn apart by lies. It was the Akatsuki's playbook on a national scale. It was the kind of political poison Danzo Shimura had specialized in. He opened his eyes. The playful curiosity he'd shown since Logue Town was gone, replaced by the sharp, analytical gaze of a Kage. "This crocodile," he said, his voice cutting through the argument. "He's a leader who rules through fear and deception. He creates a problem, then presents himself as the solution. He profits from the chaos he creates." He looked at Vivi, his expression softening with empathy. "It's a classic strategy. And it has a classic weakness." Everyone in the room turned to him. "A lie is fragile," Naruto continued. "It needs darkness to survive. You can't fight an army. You can't stop a rebellion with your fists. But you can expose the truth. If you show the people of Alabasta, both the rebels and the royalists, that they have a common enemy, the war will stop on its own." Vivi stared at him, her eyes wide with a dawning hope. "But how? No one will believe me. They think Crocodile is a hero." "Then we won't tell them," Naruto said, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips. It was the smile of a spymaster, a strategist about to deploy his most potent weapon. "We'll show them." He held up his hand, bringing two fingers together. "How many towns and cities are there between here and the capital, Alyabarna?" Alabasta was a kingdom dying of thirst. The desert was vast, a sea of golden sand under a merciless, white-hot sun. The heat was a physical presence, shimmering off the dunes, stealing the moisture from your breath. The crew, unused to such a harsh climate, suffered. Luffy complained constantly. Usopp feared he would evaporate. Sanji lamented what the heat was doing to his complexion. Only Naruto seemed unaffected. He walked through the blistering heat, the sun beating down on his orange jacket, without so much as a drop of sweat on his brow. His control over his own body's systems was absolute. But his placid expression hid a deep, simmering anger. He could feel the land's pain. The natural energy here was weak, brittle, and crying out for water. This wasn't a natural drought. It was a wound. A crime against nature itself. Their journey across the desert became a covert military operation. At Naruto's direction, they avoided the main roads, traveling along ancient, forgotten trade routes Nami found on an old map, supplemented by Vivi's local knowledge. In the first major city they reached, the oasis of Yuba, they saw the conflict firsthand. The remnants of a rebel cell were clashing with a small royal army garrison. It was a pathetic, desperate skirmish, born of thirst and misunderstanding. While the Straw Hats prepared to intervene directly, Naruto held them back. "Wait," he commanded. He created a single shadow clone. The clone walked into the no-man's land between the two factions, holding its hands up in a gesture of peace. It was promptly shot at by both sides. The arrows and bullets passed through it as it flickered and disappeared. Then, another clone appeared. And another. Soon, a line of 100 silent Narutos stood between the two armies, an impassable wall of orange. They didn't fight back. They just stood there, absorbing the attacks, each one vanishing in a puff of smoke only to be replaced by another. The fighting faltered, then stopped. The soldiers on both sides stared, confused and unnerved by the silent, unkillable apparitions. Then, the real plan began. From behind the royal army's lines, a new group of Naruto clones appeared. They were not dressed in orange. They were disguised, using a simple transformation jutsu, as Baroque works agents, complete with the ridiculous costumes and hairstyles. "Excellent. Let them kill each other," one of the fake agents shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Once they're weak enough, Mr. Zero will take everything. All hail Crocodile." At the same time, behind the rebel lines, another group of disguised clones did the same. "Keep fighting, you fools. The more chaos, the better for Baroque works." The soldiers on both sides froze, looking from the fake agents to each other. A seed of doubt, expertly planted, began to sprout. Was this all a setup? The final phase was even more audacious. While the two sides were hesitating, a third group of 1,000 clones, led by Naruto himself, bypassed the city entirely. They moved like ghosts through the desert until they found their target, a massive, hidden caravan, guarded by Baroque Works agents, carrying huge caches of dance powder, the very substance causing the drought. The fight was over before it began. Naruto and his clones descended on the caravan like a silent storm, neutralizing the guards with swift, precise strikes. They didn't destroy the powder. They seized it. By the time the sun set on Yuba, the royal and rebel soldiers weren't fighting. They were standing together, staring at the mountain of confiscated dance powder the clones had piled in the center of the town square, along with the bound and gagged Baroque Works agents. The truth, laid bare for all to see. This pattern was repeated across Alabasta. In every town they passed, Naruto's clones, a veritable army of spies, saboteurs, and agents of truth, preceded them. They intercepted messages. They exposed agents. They revealed crocodiles hand bit by bit, not with grand declarations, but with undeniable physical evidence. The massive rebel army, marching on the capital, began to fracture. Soldiers deserted, their belief in the cause shattered by the whispers of a third party manipulating them all. The civil war was being dismantled from the inside out, without a single major battle. The Straw Hats were mostly relegated to the role of bodyguards for Vivi, watching Naruto's grand strategy unfold with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. "This is insane," Usopp muttered, watching a squad of clones silently disarm a Baroque Works outpost. "He's fighting a war without fighting a war." "He thinks differently," Zoro observed, his hand on his swords. "We see a fight. He sees the whole battlefield." Nami watched him most of all. She saw the commander, the Kage, emerge. He moved with a quiet, unshakable authority, his plans complex but his commands simple. Yet, in the quiet moments, around the campfire at night, he would revert to the gentle, curious man she was getting to know. He would listen, fascinated, as she explained the constellations of the Grand Line, so different from his own. One evening, as they camped near the ruins of an ancient temple, she was tending to a cut on her arm, a minor injury from a run-in with some of the desert's more aggressive wildlife. "Here," Naruto said, kneeling beside her. "Let me." Before she could protest, he placed his palm over the wound. A soft, green light emanated from his hand, warm and soothing. She watched, mesmerized, as the skin knitted itself back together, the cut vanishing in seconds, leaving not even a scar. The mystic palm technique. A simple medical jutsu. "You're a doctor, too?" she asked, her voice hushed. "Just some basic field medicine," he said, his eyes not leaving her arm. His touch lingered for a moment longer than necessary, his thumb gently stroking her skin. The simple, innocent contact sent a jolt through her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the healing energy. She pulled her arm back, her face flushing. I could have handled it." "I know," he said softly, his blue eyes meeting hers. "But you don't have to handle everything alone anymore." The intimacy of the moment, the quiet desert night, his words, his touch, it was overwhelming. She felt a powerful urge to lean in, to close the small distance between them. The air crackled with unspoken feelings. The moment was broken by Luffy's stomach rumbling with the force of a minor earthquake, followed by a loud demand for meat. Nami jumped, flustered, and busied herself with their supplies, her heart hammering against her ribs. Naruto just watched her, a small, knowing smile on his face. The connection between them was no longer a whisper. It was a tangible thing, a growing force as powerful and undeniable as the desert sun. Their journey led them to Rain Base, the city of dreams, where Crocodile's casino, the Rain Dinners, served as his headquarters. While Luffy, in his typical fashion, charged in the front door demanding a fight, Naruto executed his final gambit. He, along with Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and a disguised Vivi, allowed themselves to be captured by Crocodile's agents, a ruse to get them into the heart of the enemy's lair. They were brought before him in the casino's lavish VIP lounge, a room with a massive window overlooking the city. Sir Crocodile was exactly as Naruto had imagined. He was tall and imposing, with a scarred face, a massive golden hook for a hand, and an air of supreme, arrogant confidence. He sat in a plush chair, smoking a thick cigar, looking down at them like a king observing insects. Smoker, the marine captain from Logue Town, was also present, trapped in a seastone cage, a testament to Crocodile's power and influence. "So," Crocodile rumbled, his voice a low drawl. "This is the ragtag band of fools that has been causing so much trouble for my organization." "And the Golden Hurricane," he said, his cold eyes landing on Naruto. "I've heard reports about you. Some kind of new devil fruit? Your little clone trick is amusing, I'll admit." "It's more than a trick," Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm. He stood relaxed, his hands in his pockets, seemingly unimpressed by the warlord. "It's the end of your little kingdom of lies." Crocodile laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Bold words for a man in a cage. You are too late. The final stage of my plan is already in motion. A bomb, powerful enough to wipe out the entire Royal Plaza, is set to detonate in the capital. It will kill both the rebel and royal armies in one fell swoop. I will be seen as the sole victim of the king's treachery, and the grieving people of Alabasta will beg me to be their new king. Utopia will be mine." He smirked. "You haven't stopped my war. You've merely gathered all my enemies in one place for a convenient execution." Vivi gasped in horror. Nami's face went pale. Naruto, however, just shook his head. "You talk too much." He flexed his shoulders. The seastone chains that bound him didn't just break, they crumbled into dust. They hadn't been seastone at all, just regular steel painted blue, a bluff. Crocodile's eyes widened in surprise. "You think I'd walk into the heart of your fortress without a plan?" Naruto asked. He glanced at the massive window. "Right now, hundreds of my clones are evacuating the Royal Plaza in Alyabarna. Another team is already searching for your bomb. And as for your reputation..." He made a hand sign. Outside the window, in the bustling streets of Rain Base, chaos erupted. Hundreds of Naruto clones, disguised as Crocodile himself, began rampaging through the city. They smashed storefronts, terrorized citizens, and openly proclaimed their intent to bleed Alabasta dry. The hero of the people was being unmasked in the most public and undeniable way possible. "You built your power on an image," Naruto said, his voice dropping as Crocodile's face contorted in fury. "And I'm tearing that image apart, piece by piece." Crocodile let out a roar of pure rage, his body dissolving into sand. "You dare? I'll kill you. I'll drain every last drop of moisture from your body and leave you a withered husk." The floor turned to sand, trapping Zoro, Nami, and the others. But Naruto was already moving. He knew from his encounter with Smoker how Logias worked. But sand was different from smoke. It had a weakness. A simple, fundamental weakness. He bit his thumb, drawing blood, and slammed his palm on the ground. Summoning Jutsu. In a massive puff of smoke that filled the entire lounge, a gigantic toad appeared. It was Gamakichi, now almost as large as his father, Gamabunta, wearing a happy coat and carrying a massive tanto. "Yo, Naruto. What's up?" Gamakichi croaked, his huge eyes blinking. "Whoa, fancy place. Are we fighting that sand guy?" Crocodile, reformed from his sand form, stared in disbelief at the colossal talking toad that had just appeared in his VIP lounge. "He's a Logia, Kichi," Naruto said, perched on the toad's head. "He's vulnerable to liquids. So, let's make it rain." "You got it." Gamakichi grinned, taking a deep breath. Water gun. A massive torrent of water, far more powerful than Chu's pathetic attempt, blasted from the toad's mouth. It wasn't aimed at Crocodile. It was aimed at the ceiling. The deluge soaked the entire room, drenching the plush carpets, the expensive furniture, and Crocodile himself. The warlord shrieked as the water touched him. His sand form solidified, unable to disperse. He was vulnerable. "My turn," Naruto said, leaping from Gamakichi's head. He formed a Rasengan in his hand, the swirling blue sphere casting a brilliant light across the soaked room. The battle that followed was a clash of kings. Crocodile, even when solid, was a formidable opponent. His golden hook was deadly, his poison-laced attacks vicious. But he was a king of deceit and shadow, facing a king of will and light. It was no contest. Naruto moved like a phantom, his sage mode predicting Crocodile's every move. He dodged the poison hook, deflected sand blades, and countered every desperate attack with overwhelming force. The final blow was not just physical, it was ideological. As Crocodile lunged, trying to impale him on his hook, Naruto caught the weapon in his bare hand, the metal groaning under the pressure. "A true king protects his people," Naruto said, his voice ringing with power, his glowing eyes boring into Crocodile's. "He doesn't feed on them. You're not a king. You're just a parasite." He drove the Rasengan into Crocodile's gut. The force of the blow was cataclysmic. It didn't just defeat him, it shattered the very foundation of his power, blasting him upward, through the roof of his own casino, and sending him flying into the sky above the city, a defeated god cast out of his own heaven. He crashed back down into the desert, unconscious, his reign of terror over. In the aftermath, as Gamakichi vanished in a puff of smoke and the Straw Hats freed a stunned smoker, "I didn't ask for your help, Straw Hat brat," he'd grumbled, before begrudgingly letting them go. Nami rushed to Naruto's side. "Are you all right?" she asked, her eyes scanning him for injuries. Her hand rested on his arm, a gesture that was now natural, unconscious. "I'm fine," he said, the golden glow of his sage mode fading. He looked tired, but his eyes were bright with victory. He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. The worry, the genuine fear she had for his safety, was plain to see. He covered her hand with his own. "I told you," he said softly, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Or to this crew." In the ruins of the casino, with a nation being saved from the brink of destruction, their shared glance was a silent confession. The battle for Alabasta was won. But for them, a new, far more complicated and beautiful struggle was just beginning. Chapter 6, The God in the Clouds and the Arbiter's Arrow. The sky broke. That was the only way to describe it. One moment, the Going Merry was sailing on a placid, unnaturally warm patch of the Grand Line, the log pose spinning wildly, pointing neither forward nor back, but straight up. The next, the world turned upside down. A colossal shadow fell over them, not from a cloud, but from a swirling vortex in the heavens, a whirlpool in the sky. "Knock upstream!" Nami yelled from the helm, her voice a mix of terror and wild, academic excitement. "It's a legendary, high-pressure waterspout that shoots straight into the air. Hold on." The ship was seized by a force beyond comprehension. It wasn't like sailing, or even like being tossed by a storm. It was like being fired from a cannon. The Mary was sucked into the roaring column of water and propelled upward at a sickening velocity, the sea and sky becoming a blur of blue and white. Usopp's screams were lost in the deafening roar. Luffy was laughing, of course. Naruto stood at the bow, his feet planted firmly on the deck, a thin layer of chakra anchoring him. He extended his senses, not his chakra sense, which was still mostly blind in this world, but his sage mode. He felt the colossal, churning natural energy of the waterspout, a force of nature so immense it dwarfed anything he had felt on the seas below. But above it, higher than he could see, he felt something else. Something vast, empty, and strangely geometric. An island. An island floating in the sky. And on that island, a singular point of energy burned with a cold, clean light, utterly alien to the wild, chaotic energies of the world below. It was a perfectly controlled, humming power that felt less like life and more like a machine. It felt wrong. The Mary burst through a thick layer of clouds and into a new world. They were floating on a sea of clouds, a solid-looking expanse of white that stretched to the horizon. Above them was a sky of impossible blue, and in the distance, an island of green and gold hovered as if it were the most natural thing in the world. It was a place of myth, a sailor's fantasy brought to life. Skypiea. But the sense of wonder was shattered by an immediate threat. As their battered ship drifted onto the cloud sea, a figure descended from the sky island. It was not a man with wings, like the legend said. It was a man made of light. He hovered in the air, his body a shimmering, semi-translucent gold, his face handsome but utterly devoid of expression. He wore robes of pure white, and his eyes glowed with the intensity of miniature suns. He radiated an aura of absolute superiority and divine arrogance. This was the cold, clean power Naruto had sensed. Anomaly identified, the being of light said, his voice not a sound produced by vocal cords, but a pure, resonant chime that seemed to vibrate in the air itself. Designation, Maelstrom. You have trespassed upon the sacred domain of the Arbiter, Salus. By the will of Lord Aeon, your chaotic existence is an affront to order. Prepare for purification. The Straw Hat stared, dumbfounded. Whoa, a shiny guy. Luffy exclaimed. He's a Logia. Made of light. Nami whispered, her hand instinctively going to her climatact. This was beyond anything she had ever read or charted. Naruto stepped forward, his expression grim. This was it. The hunt he had known was coming. The name Lord Aeon confirmed Stiletto's shadowy presence. This wasn't a random encounter. This was an executioner. So you're one of Aeon's lapdogs, Naruto said, his voice low. I was wondering when you'd show up. Salus tilted his head, a gesture of mild, clinical curiosity. The anomaly communicates. Interesting. It will not change the outcome. He raised a hand, his fingers glowing with unbearable brightness. The sentence is erasure. Divine arrow. A thin, pencil-like beam of pure, concentrated light shot from his fingertip. It moved at a speed that defied perception. It wasn't just fast, it was instantaneous. One moment, it was on his finger. The next, it was meant to be in Naruto's chest. There was no time to dodge. No time to form a hand sign. Naruto's instincts, honed in a war against opponents who could bend space and time, took over. He didn't move his body. He moved his truth-seeking orbs. One of the black spheres behind his back zipped forward, faster than thought, and intercepted the beam. There was no explosion. The beam of light, a weapon that could likely pierce a mountain, simply vanished upon contact with the sphere of absolute nothingness. It was unmade. A flicker of surprise, the first crack in his divine composure, appeared on Salus's face. Matter negation. A complex ability for such a primitive entity. Naruto's eyes narrowed. This wasn't like fighting Smoker or Crocodile. This wasn't an element. This was energy itself. How do you fight light? Luffy. Nami. Get the ship behind that big cloud. Naruto yelled, not taking his eyes off Salus. This is not a fight you can be near. But Naruto. Luffy protested, already winding up a punch. I can help. No. Naruto's voice was a whip-crack of command, the Kage authority returning with full force. His attacks are too fast. You can't see them coming. Get everyone to safety. That's an order. Luffy, startled by the sheer intensity in Naruto's voice, hesitated, then nodded grimly. Nami. Nami was already at the helm, her face pale but determined. She guided the Mary towards the cloud bank, the rest of the crew providing what little propulsion they could. They understood. This was a battle on a different plane of existence. With his crew moving to safety, Naruto gave Sailus his full attention. He entered his six-path sage mode, his body igniting in a cloak of golden chakra, his eyes shifting to the cross-hatched pattern of a master of nature. He could feel it now, the way Salus's energy worked. The man wasn't just controlling light, he was light. "Let's see how you handle this," Naruto said, his hands blurring through seals. Sage art, lava release Raisin Shuriken. He created a Rasengan, infusing it with the chakra of the four tails, Son Goku. The swirling sphere became a molten, incandescent shuriken of lava, burning with a heat that made the very air shimmer. He hurled it. The weapon of mass destruction shrieked through the air, aimed directly at the light man. Sailus didn't move. He simply watched it approach. The instant before the lava shuriken would have hit him, his body dissolved. He became a formless cascade of golden particles, a shower of light. The Raisin Shuriken passed straight through him, continuing its trajectory until it slammed into a distant cloud island, detonating in a volcanic explosion that turned a chunk of the skyland into molten slag. Sailus reformed behind Naruto, his expression still one of clinical detachment. "Your attacks are crude displays of thermal and kinetic energy. I am energy itself. You are attempting to drown the sea with a bucket of water." He raised both hands. Sacred rain. From his palms, 1,000 smaller divine arrows rained down, a deadly shower of light aimed at Naruto. Naruto reacted instantly. His truth-seeking orbs expanded, forming a protective black dome around him. The light arrows peppered the dome, each one being silently negated, but the sheer volume of the attack was staggering. He was completely on the defensive. This was bad. His orbs were a finite defense. They could be destroyed, and he couldn't create more. This Sailus could seemingly produce his light attacks indefinitely. He needed a new strategy. He couldn't hit him. He couldn't overpower him. But maybe he didn't have to. Naruto dropped the defensive dome, a new idea forming in his mind. He dodged and weaved through the tail end of the light shower, his movements a blur of gold. Sailus tracked him, firing precise, single shots. Naruto let one get close enough to feel the strange, clean heat of it. It wasn't fire. It was pure energy. And it was being drawn from somewhere. Sage mode wasn't just about power. It was about understanding. About becoming one with the natural energy of the world. He had been trying to fight Sailus with the energy from his own world, the chakra of the tailed beasts. But what if he used the energy of this world? He landed on a solid bank of cloud, closing his eyes for a bare second. He extended his senses, not to Sailus, but to the world around him. The sky. The sea of clouds. The island above. The very air. It was teeming with a wild, chaotic, and incredibly powerful natural energy, the same untamed force he had felt from the knock-up stream. It was everywhere. Sailus hovered before him. "Have you surrendered to the inevitable, anomaly? Your struggles are futile." "I'm just changing tactics," Naruto said, opening his eyes. The golden glow around him shifted. It became brighter, wilder, less controlled. He wasn't just using his own power anymore. He was drawing in the raw, untamed natural energy of Skypiea. It was like trying to drink from a fire hose. The power was immense, almost too much to handle, but his mastery of Sage mode allowed him to barely keep it in check. "Your energy signature is fluctuating," Sailus noted, a hint of what might have been concern in his chime-like voice. "You are absorbing ambient energy. A dangerous and foolish gambit. You will overload your primitive biological form." "We'll see," Naruto grinned, feeling the new power surge through him. It was a thrilling, terrifying feeling. He created a Rasengan in his palm. But this one was different. It wasn't just blue. It was a swirling vortex of blue, white, and gold, crackling with raw, untamed power. It was a Rasengan made not just of his chakra, but of the very essence of the Grand Line sky. You can become light, Naruto said, his voice resonating with newfound power. You can let attacks pass through you. But you can't be in two states at once. You are either formless energy, or you are a solidified being who can attack. And your light, it has to come from somewhere. He didn't throw the Rasengan. He held it in his palm and charged. Saelus, seeing the raw power in the attack, reacted as he had before. His body began to dissolve into a cascade of golden particles. But Naruto was ready. The moment Saelus's form began to break apart, Naruto thrust the wild Rasengan forward, not at Saelus, but at the space around him. Sage Art, Maelstrom Devourer. He didn't release the Rasengan. He detonated it. The sphere of chaotic energy exploded outward in a massive, swirling vortex. It wasn't a kinetic blast. It was a vortex of pure, devouring natural energy. It acted like a sponge, like a black hole, sucking in all the ambient energy in the immediate vicinity. Saelus's dissolving form was caught in the pull. The golden particles that made up his body were being drawn into the swirling chaos of Naruto's jutsu. For the first time, a look of genuine shock and panic appeared on the light man's face. He was trying to reform, but the vortex was pulling his very essence apart. He was losing cohesion. Impossible. Saelus chimed, his voice distorted and panicked. My form is absolute. I am energy perfected. Your energy is just another part of nature. Naruto roared, pushing more power into the vortex. And nature is my ally. He was essentially using a Sage Art-enhanced version of the Preta-Path's absorption, but on a massive, indiscriminate scale. He wasn't just absorbing Saelus's light form, he was absorbing the very natural energy Saelus needed to maintain that form. He was starving him of power. With a final, desperate cry, Saelus's form was completely pulled into the vortex. For a moment, Naruto's jutsu blazed with the light of a captured sun, before he finally clenched his fist and dispelled it, the excess energy dissipating harmlessly into the sky. In the place where Saelus had been, a man fell. A normal, flesh-and-blood man, his white robes now looking like a simple costume. He was unconscious, his face pale, his divine glow gone. He splashed into the cloud sea, sinking slowly into the white fluff. Naruto floated there, breathing heavily, the wild sage mode receding. He was drained. That last technique had taken almost everything out of him. But he had won. He had found a way to defeat an opponent who was conceptually immune to his power. He hadn't just overpowered him, he'd outthought him. He retrieved the unconscious Saelus from the clouds, slinging him over his shoulder. This man was a font of information, and Naruto intended to get it. He flew towards the cloud bank where the Mary was hiding. As he approached, he saw his crew staring at him, their faces a mixture of relief and absolute, jaw-dropping awe. They had witnessed a battle between gods, and their friend, their crewmate, had just won. Zoro had a look on his face that was no longer just rivalry, but something approaching worship. Sanji's cigarette had burned down to his fingers without him noticing. Usopp was on his knees, praying to his new god, Captain Naruto. Nami was at the railing, her hands clutching the wood, her eyes wide. She wasn't looking at him with awe. She was looking at him with a fierce, possessive pride, and a deep, gut-wrenching fear for what he had just gone through. He landed softly on the deck, dropping the unconscious Saelus in a heap. Is it over? Vivi asked, her voice trembling. For now, Naruto said, his voice rough with exhaustion. He looked at the unconscious arbiter. But this was just a messenger. The one who sent him is the real threat. He knelt beside Saelus, his hand glowing with a faint green energy. He wasn't healing him. He was using a variation of the Yamanaka clan's mind-probing technique, a far gentler version he had developed himself. He needed answers. Images, feelings, and intentions flooded his mind. He saw the cold, sterile ships of the silent arbiters. He saw their fanatical devotion to a concept they called the Great Silence, a universe wiped clean of chaos, free will, and emotion. And he saw their leader, Lord Aeon. The image was fractured, seen through the filter of Salus's worshipful reverence. Aeon was a tall, elegant figure in the robes of a celestial dragon, but his face was always in shadow. Naruto couldn't see his features, but he could feel his power. It was the opposite of Naruto's own. Naruto's power was a force of life, of connection, of will. Aeon's was a force of utter, absolute nothingness. A void. It was the power to erase. The power to unmake. It felt chillingly similar to the truth-seeking orbs, but wielded as an offensive, all-consuming force. And he saw Aeon's motive. Aeon saw the world as a failed experiment. The foolishness of the celestial dragons, the anarchy of the pirates, the endless, messy cycle of life and death, he saw it all as a chaotic stain. He believed himself to be a divine surgeon, and beings like Naruto, beings of immense, unpredictable power, were cancers that had to be excised before they could spread. Naruto pulled back from the man's mind, a grim look on his face. This was worse than he thought. He wasn't just a target. He was an ideological enemy. He and Luffy, and everything the Straw Hats stood for, freedom, chaos, dreams, were anathema to Aeon's vision of a perfect, silent universe. This wasn't a battle for territory or treasure. It was a battle for the soul of the world itself. What did you see? Nami asked, her voice soft, her hand resting on his shoulder. Naruto looked up at her, at his crew, this small, chaotic, beautiful family he had found. He had lost his world. He would not stand by and watch this one be purified into oblivion. A god who wants to silence the world, Naruto said, his voice heavy. He stood up, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. And I think I'm the only one who can stop him. The adventure to the Sky Island was no longer a treasure hunt. It was the first step into a much larger, much more dangerous war. Chapter 7, The City of Water and the Gilded Cage. Skypiea, after the terrifying arrival of Salus, turned out to be a land of breathtaking wonder. They met the Shandian warriors, a people whose fierce pride and long struggle for their homeland resonated deeply with Naruto. They fought and then befriended a man who called himself a god, Enel, whose lightning-based devil fruit was fearsome but whose ego was his ultimate downfall. Naruto's victory over him was less a battle and more a stern lesson in humility, ending not with a cataclysmic Rasengan, but with Naruto nullifying Enel's electrical form with a simple wind-style jutsu that dissipated his body like a static charge, leaving him shocked and powerless. The descent from the sky was far less graceful than the ascent, involving a giant octopus-shaped hot air balloon and a terrifying landing in the middle of a marine base, which they only escaped thanks to Sanji's quick thinking and Usopp's newly acquired, ridiculously powerful Skypiea dials. But the real world, as it turned out, was far more dangerous than any self-proclaimed god in the clouds. Their journey led them to Water 7, the City of Water. It was a marvel of architecture and engineering, a metropolis built around a network of canals, its streets flowing with water instead of dirt. The air hummed with the sound of hammers and saws from the Galila Company, the world's greatest shipwrights. The city was alive, vibrant, and beautiful. It felt like a place of respite, a haven to repair their battered ship and rest. It was a gilded cage. They arrived with two goals: find a shipwright to fix the grievously wounded Going Merry, and exchange the gold they'd brought down from Skypiea for berries. Nami, her eyes practically sparkling with dollar signs, took charge of the latter, marching off to the bank with Usopp and Naruto as her designated bodyguards. The sum was staggering, 300 million berries. Enough to buy a fleet of ships, or a small country. Enough to make them targets for every greedy soul in the city. The first sign that something was wrong came when they returned to the docks. The Merry was gone. In its place stood a tall, slender man in a top hat, holding a ventriloquist's dummy. He was flanked by a brutish-looking man with a strange, square nose. They introduced themselves as Lucci and Kaku, shipwrights from Galila, and informed them with cold professionalism that their ship was beyond repair. The keel was broken. It would never sail again. The news hit the crew like a physical blow. To Naruto, a ship was a tool, a means of transport. But to the Straw Hats, the Mary was a living, breathing member of their family. The argument that erupted between Luffy and Usopp over the ship's fate was brutal and heartbreaking. It was a schism, a deep crack in the foundation of their found family. Usopp, feeling useless and left behind, challenged Luffy to a duel for ownership of the ship. The fight was a tragedy. Usopp, with his cunning traps and desperate ingenuity, fought harder than Naruto had ever seen him fight. But Luffy, as captain, could not back down. He won, but the victory cost him a piece of his soul. He left the Mary to Usopp and walked away, the carefree grin gone from his face, replaced by the grim mask of a leader forced to make an impossible choice. Naruto watched it all, his heart aching with a familiar pain. He had seen it before, two brothers, two friends, driven apart by their own pride and pain. Sasuke and himself. The parallel was so sharp it stole his breath. He wanted to intervene, to force them to see reason, to use his power. To fix the ship and mend the rift. But Nami's hand on his arm stopped him. "You can't," she whispered, her own eyes filled with tears. This is their fight. It's something Luffy has to do as captain. It's something Usopp has to do for his pride. He understood, but it didn't make it any easier. He felt a surge of helpless anger. He could defeat gods and warlords, but he was powerless to heal the fractured heart of his own family. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The next morning, the mayor of Water 7, Iceberg, was brutally attacked, and the Straw Hats were framed for the crime. The entire city turned against them. The friendly faces of the Galila shipwrights became the cold masks of hunters as they pursued the crew through the labyrinthine canals. It was too clean, too convenient. Naruto knew a setup when he saw one. This wasn't the work of petty criminals or a grieving city. This was a professional operation. The truth came in the dead of night, in Iceberg's ravaged office. The attackers returned to finish the job, and the Straw Hats, hiding in the shadows, finally saw their faces. Lucci. Kaku. A beautiful but cold woman named Califa, and a man with a bizarre zipper on his mouth named Blueno. They were not shipwrights. They were assassins. And they weren't just after the blueprints for the ancient weapon Pluton, which they believed Iceberg possessed. They had a secondary target. "Our primary mission is the Pluton blueprints," Lucci said, his voice a low, predatory purr, his pigeon, Hattori, perched silently on his shoulder. But our client had a secondary, high-priority contract. The acquisition of the anomaly-designated Maelstrom. He turned his cold, empty eyes to where Naruto and the others were hidden, as if he could see them through the walls. "We know you're here." They revealed themselves, not as Galila shipwrights, but as Cipher Pole No. 9, the world government's most secret and powerful intelligence agency. Their client, Lucci explained with a cruel smile, was a mysterious and powerful benefactor who had paid an astronomical sum for Naruto's capture, alive and intact. A benefactor who operated outside the normal channels of the world government. Lord Aeon. He wasn't sending another divine being. He was using the world's own systems, its most ruthless secret police, as his weapon. It was brilliant. It was insidious. The fight that followed was a blur of chaos. CP9 were masters of a superhuman martial art they called Rokushiki, the Six Powers. They could move faster than the eye could see, harden their bodies like iron, and turn their fingers into deadly projectiles. They were a match for Zoro's swordsmanship and Sanji's powerful kicks. Blueno, using his Dordor fruit, created a portal and escaped with their real target, not Iceberg, but Robin, who had secretly been working with them to protect the Straw Hats from a Buster Call, the government's most destructive military order. Naruto found himself facing Rob Lucci. The man was a prodigy of death, his movements precise, economical, and utterly lethal. His finger pistol technique, firing compressed air bullets from his fingertip, was a crude but effective imitation of a chakra-based projectile. "You are the target," Lucci stated, his expression unchanging as he dodged a punch from Naruto that cracked the stone wall behind him. "Your abilities are an unknown quantity. Our client wants to study you, to dissect you, to understand how you function. Tell your client to come try it himself," Naruto snarled, his anger rising. These people weren't just enemies, they were tools. And they were using his family, his friends, as pawns to get to him. The fight was a stalemate. Lucci's iron body technique could withstand Naruto's normal punches, and his speed was considerable. Naruto was holding back, trying not to level the entire building, but his patience was wearing thin. The fight was interrupted when the rest of CP9, having secured Robin, signaled their retreat. "This is not over," Lucci said, before vanishing in a blur of movement. "We will meet again at Eni's lobby." Eni's lobby. The Judiciary Island. The gateway to Impel Down, the world's most inescapable prison. They had taken Robin, and they fully intended to come back for Naruto. The crew was shattered, beaten, and now hunted by the world's most dangerous assassins. They stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, the weight of their failure pressing down on them. Robin was gone. Usopp was gone. The Mary was gone. The city hated them. Their dreams seemed to be dissolving into a nightmare. Nami was trembling, not from cold, but from sheer terror. She had faced down fishmen and pirates, but this was different. This was the world government itself, a monolithic entity of seemingly limitless power. And they were hunting the man she cared for. She grabbed Naruto's arm, her grip desperate. "We have to run," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Naruto, you heard him. They want you. This is all because of you. If you leave, they'll leave us alone. You can escape. You're fast enough, you're strong enough. You can get away and hide." Her words were a knife in his chest. "This is all because of you." He knew it was true. His very existence was a magnet for these godlike threats. He was endangering them all just by being here. The logical, responsible thing to do would be to leave. To draw the fire away from them. It would be the noble sacrifice. He looked at her, at the raw fear in her eyes. It wasn't an accusation. It was a desperate plea for him to save himself. She was willing to face the world government to save Robin, but she couldn't bear the thought of them capturing him. He gently took her hands in his grip firm and steadying. "Nami," he said, his voice soft but unwavering. "Look at me." She met his gaze, tears welling in her eyes. "When I first came to this world, I had nothing," he said, his voice resonating with an emotional clarity that cut through her panic. "My home was gone. My friends were gone. I was alone, adrift in a world I didn't understand." He squeezed her hands. "Then I found you. I found Luffy, and Zoro, and Usopp, and Sanji. This chaotic, infuriating, dysfunctional crew." A small, genuine smile touched his lips. "You're my precious people now. You are my home. I don't run from a threat to my home. I eliminate it." The sheer, unshakable conviction in his voice stunned her into silence. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't arrogance. It was a simple, profound declaration of love and loyalty. He was choosing them. He was choosing her, over his own safety. He was declaring war on the world for them. "But, how?" she whispered. "It's the world government. We can't." "They picked a fight with the wrong shinobi," Naruto said, his eyes hardening, a dangerous, golden light beginning to glow within them. He turned to Luffy, who was staring at the distant judicial island with a look of grim determination. "Luffy. We're going to get Robin back. And I'm going to dismantle this little secret police force of theirs. Are you with me?" Luffy looked at Naruto, then at his remaining crew. The fire returned to his eyes, the iron will of a captain who had been pushed too far. "Yeah," he said, cracking his knuckles. "We're going to kick their asses." The raid on Eni's lobby was not a stealth operation. It was a declaration of war. They stormed the island on the sea train, a locomotive that ran on tracks laid over the ocean, crashing through the outer gates with the help of the Frankie family, a group of local delinquents who had come to respect the Straw Hat's guts. They stood on the causeway, facing the full might of the Judiciary Island. Thousands of Marine soldiers and government agents stood between them and the Tower of Justice, where Robin was being held. Luffy took the lead. In a moment that would go down in history, he stood before the tower and screamed Robin's name, demanding she say she wanted to live. Her tearful, heartfelt cry, "I want to live," was the catalyst. The battle began. While the Straw Hats and their newfound allies engaged the fodder soldiers, Naruto's objective was different. He wasn't here for a brawl. He was here for a strategic takedown. "I'm going to the top of that tower," he said to Luffy. "I'll handle CP9. You just clear a path for everyone else." Before anyone could argue, he was gone. He didn't run. He moved in a series of instantaneous flashes of yellow light, a self-taught imitation of his father's flying Raijin technique, using small, pre-placed chakra seals he'd subtly left on the sea train during their approach. He flickered from point to point, bypassing the entire army, appearing on the balcony of the Tower of Justice in the blink of an eye. He found CP9 there, waiting for him, with a chained Robin and their sniveling commander, Spandam. "So, the anomaly comes to us," Lucci purred, stepping forward as his colleagues took defensive stances. "Bold. Foolish. Just efficient," Naruto replied, his gaze sweeping over them. "Kaku. Jabra. Blueno. Califa. Komodori. Fukuru. And Lucci. 7 of the world government's finest assassins. And Spandam, who was less a threat and more an annoyance." "You've threatened my friends," Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You tried to break my family apart. And you used the good people of Water 7 as your pawns." His body began to glow, the golden chakra of his Sage of Six Paths mode flaring to life, so bright it was almost blinding. "The time for games is over." What happened next was not a series of one-on-one duels. It was a slaughter. Califa moved first, her body a blur as she tried to strike him with her bubble-based powers. Naruto didn't even look at her. One of his truth-seeking orbs shot out, transforming into a long, black staff. It tapped her lightly on the forehead. The agent's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed, unconscious. Jabra and Kaku attacked simultaneously, one in his wolf form, the other in his giraffe form, their attacks a whirlwind of claws, fangs, and Rankyaku air blades. Naruto simply raised a hand. A colossal, golden chakra arm erupted from his back, a manifestation of Kurama's power. It swatted them out of the air like flies, slamming them into the tower wall with enough force to crack the stone. The others attacked, a frenzy of Rokushiki techniques. Naruto was a phantom in their midst. A chop to the neck here, a precise chakra point strike there. He moved with a terrifying, otherworldly grace, each movement perfectly economical, each strike disabling an opponent with non-lethal, absolute force. He wasn't just defeating them, he was dissecting them, taking them apart with the cold precision of a surgeon. In less than 30 seconds, all of CP9 lay unconscious on the floor. All except one. Rob Lucci stood there, his expression for the first time showing something other than cold confidence. It was shock. His entire team, the most powerful assassins in a generation, had been neutralized in the time it takes to draw a breath. What are you?" Lucci whispered. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto said, the golden aura around him flaring higher, his hair standing on end, his eyes shifting from gold to a burning, slitted red. The air grew thick with a pressure that was ancient and full of rage. Kurama's chakra was surging, unleashed. A cloak of fiery red energy, shaped like a fox with 9 flowing tails, enveloped him. And I'm the man who's going to protect his family. Lucci roared, his body contorting and expanding. He transformed, his Zoan fruit awakening. He became a monstrous hybrid of man and leopard, a being of pure, savage killing intent. I will not be defeated. He charged, his speed 10 times greater than before. Ultimate 6 powers, Rokugan, he screamed, placing his fists together. A massive, devastating shockwave erupted from his hands, an attack that could shatter a battleship. Naruto didn't dodge. He met the attack head-on. He held up one hand, a miniature version of a tailed beast bomb, a sphere of dense, swirling positive and negative chakra, forming in his palm. The Rokugan slammed into it. The resulting explosion was immense. It blew the entire top off the Tower of Justice. Spandam was sent flying, screaming, into the sea below. Robin was shielded from the blast by one of Naruto's truth-seeking orbs. When the smoke cleared, Naruto stood unscathed, his chakra cloak billowing around him. Lucci was on his knees, his awakened form flickering, his body broken and bleeding. He had thrown his ultimate attack at a god, and the god hadn't even flinched. It's over, Naruto said, his voice a deep, demonic growl from the depths of the chakra cloak. He raised a hand, a colossal chakra claw forming above Lucci, ready to deliver the final blow. But then he paused. He saw the look in Lucci's eyes. It wasn't fear. It was the empty look of a man who had known nothing but killing his entire life, a tool of the government who had just been broken. There was no honor in crushing him. The chakra cloak receded, the fiery red aura dissolving back into a calm, golden glow. Naruto walked over to the kneeling Lucci and placed a hand on his head. Lucci flinched, expecting a death blow. Instead, he felt a strange warmth spread through him, a wave of empathy, of understanding. Naruto was showing him, not telling him, the pain he caused, the hollowness of his existence. Go, Naruto said, his voice back to normal. Find a life for yourself beyond being someone else's weapon. He turned his back on the broken assassin and walked to Robin, dissipating the shield around her. He broke her chains with a simple touch. Are you okay, Robin? He asked, his voice gentle. She looked at him, at the being who had just declared war on the world and won, who showed mercy to his defeated foe, who now looked at her with nothing but kindness in his eyes. She could only nod, tears streaming down her face. Far below, the world was in an uproar. The entire Battle of Enies Lobby had been broadcast to the nearby islands via transponder snails. They had seen it all. They had seen the Straw Hats declare war. They had seen Naruto ascend the tower. And they had seen the terrifying, fox-like demon of energy that had annihilated the government's strongest force. He had painted a target on his back the size of a continent. But in doing so, he had sent a clear message to Lord Aeon and the world. The Straw Hats were not to be touched. They were under his protection. And he was a force that not even the world government could cage. Chapter 8, The Iron Fist and the Hurricane's Heart. The fallout from Enies Lobby was not a wave, it was a global tsunami. The news spread across the 4 seas and the Grand Line with the speed of a wildfire, carried by screeching news coups and frantic transponder snail calls. The world government, in a desperate act of damage control, tried to spin the story, claiming the destruction was due to a Buster Call misfire. But too many people had seen the truth. They had seen the grainy, chaotic footage of a 9-tailed cloak of monstrous energy engulfing the Tower of Justice. They had heard the terrified whispers of a golden demon who had single-handedly dismantled their strongest intelligence agency. The world had a new boogeyman, and he had a face. Naruto Uzumaki's first bounty poster was issued, a grainy shot of him in his Kurama chakra mode. The picture was terrifying. The bounty was astronomical, so high it was listed only as, dead or alive, inquire directly to Fleet Command. He was no longer just a pirate, he was a global threat, a force of nature walking in human form. Aboard their new ship, a magnificent brigantine sloop built by the now allied Frankie and gifted to them. The mood was a strange cocktail of triumph and trepidation. They had rescued Robin. They had welcomed Frankie as their new shipwright. Usopp, after a tearful and dramatic apology, had rejoined the crew. Their family was whole again, stronger than before. But they were sailing in the shadow of Naruto's new infamy. The ship, which Luffy had christened the Thousand Sunny, cut through the waves, leaving the wreckage of their past behind. The respite, however, was short-lived. They were 3 days out from Water 7 when the horizon turned black. It wasn't a storm. It was a fleet. Dozens of marine battleships, arranged in a perfect, inescapable blockade formation. At the head of the fleet was a flagship twice the size of the others, its prow adorned with the head of a mythical beast. That's Vice Admiral Kaido's fleet," Robin said, her voice grim as she looked through a pair of binoculars. "They call him Iron Fist, Kaido. He's one of the new generation of powerhouse Marines, a proponent of absolute justice. He's said to have eaten a mythical Zoan fruit, one of the most powerful in existence." On the deck of the flagship, a man stood, his arms crossed, his white marine coat billowing behind him like a hero's cape. He was tall, with a severe, handsome face, dark hair streaked with gray at the temples, and eyes that burned with the cold fire of righteous conviction. He watched the Thousand Sunny approach, his expression unyielding. This was Vice Admiral Kaido. "He's not here for all of us," Naruto said quietly, standing at the bow. He could feel the man's power, even from this distance. It was immense, crackling with electrical energy, a force of nature disciplined by an iron will. It was different from Salus's clean light or Aeon's chilling void. This was the power of order, of law, made manifest. "He's here for me." A transponder snail on their deck rang. Frankie answered it. The Vice Admiral's voice, calm, clear, and utterly uncompromising, boomed from the speaker. "This is Vice Admiral Kaido of the Marine Headquarters. You have an entity aboard your vessel, known as Naruto Uzumaki. He is designated a threat to global stability on par with an emperor. Surrender him to my custody, and the Straw Hat Pirates will be granted amnesty for their crimes at Enies Lobby. Refuse, and you will all be annihilated." The offer was a poison chalice. A way out. All they had to do was sacrifice one man. Luffy snatched the receiver. "No way," he yelled into it. "Naruto is our friend. If you want him, you have to go through all of us." He slammed the receiver down, breaking it. Naruto looked at his captain, a small, grateful smile on his face. He hadn't expected anything less. He turned to his crew. "Stay on the ship. Frankie, get the coup de burst ready, just in case. This is my fight." "Like hell it is," Zoro said, drawing one of his swords. "We're a crew. We fight together." "Zoro's right," Sanji agreed, stamping out his cigarette. "We're not letting you have all the fun." Naruto shook his head. "You don't understand. This isn't a pirate or an assassin. He's a true believer. He's here to test me, to measure my power against his. It's a duel of ideals. Your getting involved will only complicate things and put you in danger. Trust me." There was a finality in his tone that silenced their protests. He looked at Nami. The color had drained from her face, but her expression was one of fierce resolve. She walked up to him, her hands checking the straps of her new, perfected Climatact. "If you need an opening," she said, her voice low and steady, "a fog bank, a thundercloud, anything, you just give the word." He looked into her eyes, seeing not a woman afraid for her life, but a partner ready to go to war for him. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "I will," he promised. The simple touch was more intimate than any kiss, a silent acknowledgement of their bond in the face of annihilation. He turned back to the fleet and leaped. He didn't fly. He ran, his feet kicking off the surface of the water, each step creating a small shockwave, propelling him forward at incredible speed. He was a golden blur, closing the miles between the ships in seconds. He landed on the deck of the flagship, 50 feet from the vice admiral, his arrival sending a tremor through the massive vessel. The surrounding Marines, hundreds of them, raised their rifles and sabers, but Kaido held up a hand. "Stand down," he commanded, his eyes never leaving Naruto. "This creature is mine." The two men sized each other up. It was a study in contrasts. Naruto, clad in his worn orange and black, radiating a wild, life-filled energy. Kaido, in his pristine white uniform, emanating an aura of crisp, disciplined power, like a contained thunderstorm. "Naruto Uzumaki," Kaido said, his voice a low baritone. "Your existence is a paradox. You fight for pirates, yet you save kingdoms. You defy the world government, yet you show mercy to your enemies. You wield the power to shatter mountains, yet you travel with a small, insignificant crew. I am here to solve this paradox. To determine if you are a force for chaos, or a potential pillar for a new order." "I'm just a man who protects his friends," Naruto replied simply. "Your order and your justice seem to cause more problems than they solve." Kaido's eyes hardened. "The law is the only thing that separates us from anarchy. Your power, unchecked and unregulated, is the greatest threat to that law. I will be your check. I will be your regulation." His body began to contort, not in the grotesque way of Lucci's transformation, but in a flash of brilliant, divine light. His form elongated, his skin becoming a coat of pearlescent white scales, a mane of crackling blue energy erupting from his back. He grew to a towering height, his face a mixture of man and beast, a single horn spiraling from his forehead. He had become a Kirin, the mythical creature of lightning and purity. Mythical Zoan. Kirin fruit. "Let us see if your will can withstand the judgment of heaven's thunder," Kaido declared, his voice now a booming echo of thunder and lightning. He moved. He didn't run. He became a bolt of lightning, streaking across the deck, his speed rivaling Naruto's own. He appeared before Naruto, his hand, now a clawed appendage crackling with blue electricity, swiping at his head. Naruto, in his sage mode, reacted instantly. He ducked under the swipe, the lightning sizzling the air where his head had been. He threw a punch, his fist glowing with natural energy. Kaido blocked it with his forearm, the impact creating a deafening sonic boom that cracked the deck plates and sent a shockwave across the water, rocking the entire fleet. The battle had begun. It was not a battle of techniques. It was a brawl of gods. A clash of pure, elemental forces. Naruto, a hurricane of golden energy and physical power, against Kaido, a storm of white lightning and righteous fury. Their fists and feet met in a series of concussive blasts that shook the heavens. Lightning arced from Kaido's form, which Naruto deflected with small, precise applications of wind style, creating barriers of air. Naruto formed a Rasengan, which Kaido met with a blast of focused lightning from his horn, the two attacks detonating in a blinding sphere of energy that vaporized a section of the ship's railing. The Marines on the surrounding ships could only watch in terror and awe. They were seeing a battle on the level of the Emperors, a clash that could reshape the very geography of the sea. "Is this all your power is?" Kaido boomed, his voice laced with disappointment as they broke apart, hovering on opposite ends of the ravaged deck. "Brute force and wild energy. You are no different from Kaido. Just another beast to be tamed." "You haven't seen anything yet," Naruto retorted, a grin spreading across his face. This was exhilarating. For the first time, he had an opponent who could match his speed and power in a direct, physical confrontation. He wasn't solving a puzzle or dismantling a system. He was fighting. And it felt good. He brought his hands together in a familiar seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 1,000 Narutos appeared on the deck of the flagship, a sea of orange that swarmed over the vessel. They didn't attack Kaido. They began systematically and non-lethally dismantling his ship and his army. They disarmed the Marines, tied them up with their own belts, and started taking the cannons apart, piece by piece. Kaido watched, his eyes widening in fury. What is this mockery? It's called strategy, the real Naruto said, appearing directly in front of him. You wanted to see if I was just a beast. A beast destroys everything in its path. I protect what's important, and I neutralize the threat. Your men are not my enemy. Your ships are not my enemy. You are. Enraged, Kaido unleashed his full power. You think your tricks can defeat divine judgment? Kirin's wrath. He became the center of a raging thunderstorm. Massive bolts of lightning rained down from the sky, striking the deck in a series of apocalyptic explosions. The Naruto clones vanished in puffs of smoke as they were hit, but they had already done their job. The flagship was effectively neutralized without a single casualty. Naruto stood in the center of the lightning storm, a calm golden aura protecting him, the bolts splitting and diverging around his body. My turn, he said, his own power beginning to surge. The golden chakra of Sage Mode deepened, and the fiery red of Kurama's power began to bleed into it, swirling together. He entered the form he had used to defeat Kagaya, the Azura Kurama mode, a colossal avatar of golden and red energy, a six-armed, three-headed fox warrior that towered over the flagship. From the Thousand Sunny, his crew watched in stunned silence. They had seen his Kurama cloak. This was something else. This was the form of a true war god. The colossal avatar looked down at the Kirin, its three heads speaking in unison, Naruto's voice amplified into a divine chorus. You fight for justice. For order. But your justice is blind, and your order is a cage. My friend's freedom is more important than your law. One of the avatar's 6 hands reached out. It didn't punch. It simply opened its palm and gently, almost contemptuously, flicked Kaido. The force was beyond comprehension. The Kirin, the demigod of lightning, was sent flying like a stone skipped across water. He crashed through 3 of his own battleships, the vessels splitting in half like toys, before finally splashing into the sea miles away. The avatar dissipated, leaving Naruto floating in the air, his power receding to a calm, golden glow. The battle was over. He hadn't just won. He had made a statement. He flew back to the Thousand Sunny, landing softly on the deck. The crew stared at him, speechless. He looked exhausted, but triumphant. He looked at Nami, and the exhaustion seemed to melt away, replaced by a soft, warm smile. That night, the mood on the ship was subdued. The victory had been absolute, but it had cemented their status as enemies of the entire world. They had defeated a vice-admiral. There was no going back. Nami found Naruto alone at the stern of the ship, staring up at the stars. The sky was clear, the sea calm. A fragile peace. She stood beside him, her shoulder brushing his. For a long time, they said nothing, simply sharing the silence. You were scared, he said finally, not looking at her. Terrified, she admitted, her voice a whisper. I watched you fight him. I saw that giant fox thing. And all I could think was, what if you lost? What if he was stronger? What happens to us if you're not here to stop the monsters? He turned to face her, his expression serious. Nami, I won't always be there. I can't fight every battle for you. That's not what a crew is. That's not what a family is. I know that, she said, frustration and fear warring in her voice. But you're different. The things coming for you, they're not from this world. Kaido was one thing, but Aeon, you're the only one who can face him. I can't lose you, Naruto. I can't. The confession hung in the air, raw and undeniable. It wasn't just about the crew's safety anymore. It was personal. It was her heart, laid bare on the deck of the ship. He stepped closer, his hands finding hers, his thumbs gently stroking her knuckles. You won't lose me, he said, his voice low and intense. I'm not that easy to get rid of. He looked into her eyes, the endless sea and the starry sky reflected in them. But Nami, I was scared too. She blinked, surprised. You? Scared of what? Of what I'm becoming in this world, he admitted, his gaze troubled. A boogeyman. A demon. A weapon. I don't want to be that. I want to be, just Naruto. The guy who loves ramen and hates waiting for water to boil. He gave a small, sad smile. The guy who gets to stand next to a brilliant navigator and watch her chase her dream. The sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability, it broke through the last of her defenses. He wasn't a god. He wasn't a demon. He was just a man, a lonely, powerful man trying to find his place, just like her. You are just Naruto, she whispered, her free hand coming up to cup his cheek, the same way he had done for her. Don't ever think you're not. The space between them vanished. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was not born of passion or desperate relief, but of a deep, quiet, and profound understanding. It was gentle, searching, a question and an answer all at once. It tasted of salt and starlight and the promise of a shared future. It was the quiet clicking of a lock, a final recognition that their two lonely journeys had merged into a single path. They were no longer just crewmates, or friends, or protector and protected. They were a hurricane and a navigator, bound together, ready to face whatever storms the world threw at them, together. A few miles away, Vice Admiral Kaido dragged himself onto the wreckage of one of his ships, his human form restored, his body bruised but his spirit unbroken. He looked out at the distant silhouette of the Thousand Sunny. He had lost. He had been utterly, humiliatingly defeated. But he had not seen a beast. He had seen a man protecting his family. He had seen a king defending his home. The paradox was not solved. It had only deepened. And Kaido knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the true enemy was not the boy in the orange jacket. It was the shadowy god who wanted to silence the world. And in that war, he was no longer sure which side he was on. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.